Good afternoon, Lord Mayor. Your meeting is now live.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm the Lord Mayor, Councillor Rob Wood. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the full council. The meeting is being broadcast to enable the press and public to view the meeting. We are meeting virtually in response to the limitations placed on the governance by the COVID-19 pandemic. For the purposes of this meeting, it will be run by reference to the model standing orders as set out in the local authorities coronavirus flexibility of local authority meetings regulations 2020. I would firstly like to welcome the Very Reverend Canon Dr. Anthony Kane, Dean of Portsmouth, who will be saying prayers. Dean.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's my privilege to lead us in prayers. Let us pray. And as the anniversary of the first lockdown approaches, let us remember before God all who have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past week, and their colleagues, families and friends. And let us give thanks for the frontline medical staff who cared for their loved ones, and all offering support and help. And let us pray for this city of Portsmouth and all who live here, for the work of the Lord Mayor and councillors, for all who bear responsibility for the ordering of our common life, for a vision of hospitable community which inspires our labours and encourages creativity, enterprise and diversity, and the use of our gifts in the service of others. And in all things, may heaven's light be our guide. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much, Dean. You're quite welcome to stay on and watch proceedings, but if you need to go somewhere, by all means do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I shall stay for at least for a while.
I would now like to invite members to introduce themselves to this virtual full council meeting. I will read your names out in alphabetical order. Can you please reply by stating your name and saying present? Before I start, I have been notified that Councillor Stagg will be joining the meeting later as she is attending a funeral. Councillor Weems has informed me that due to work commitments, he will be joining the meeting a bit later also. And Councillor Hockaday has also advised that she will join the meeting as soon as possible on her arrival shortly from work. Stuart, are there any other apologies I'm not aware of?
I've received no other apologies, Lord Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Can I also remind members to switch their microphones on when answering and switch them off again straight away? I will pause for a few seconds between calling each member. This process will take a while in view of the number of councillors involved, but please bear with us. Those who are not able to confirm they are present will be recorded as absent from the meeting, but with a footnote explaining if it is due to technical difficulties. I call Councillor Rob Wood, the Lord Mayor. I am here. Councillor Dave Ashmore.
Councillor Dave Ashmore, present, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Matthew Atkins.
Councillor Matthew Atkins, present, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Atwell.
Chris Atwell, present, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Bosher.
Simon Bosher, present, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Tom Coles.
Lord Mayor, Councillor Coles is going to be late to the meeting.
Okay, noted. Councillor Cal Corkery.
Cal Corkery, present, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Ben Dowling.
Ben Dowling, present, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Jason Fazakerley. Sorry, thank you, Councillor Dowling. Councillor Jason Fazakerley.
Councillor Jason Fazakerley, present, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor George Fielding.
Councillor George Fielding, present, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor John Ferret.
John Ferret, present, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor David Fuller. Councillor David Fuller. Okay, we'll come back.
I can see him, my Lord Mayor. He's there.
I can see him also.
So, Lord Mayor, good afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fuller. Councillor Graham Heaney.
Graham Heaney, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Joe Hooper.
Joe Hooper, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Susie Horton.
Susie Horton, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Lee Hunt.
Present Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Frank Jonas, BEM.
Okay. Councillor Frank Jonas, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Donna Jones.
Councillor Donna Jones, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Leo Madden.
Councillor Leo Madden, present.
Thank you. Councillor Hugh Mason.
Councillor Hugh Mason, present.
Thank you. Councillor Lee Mason.
Councillor Lee Mason, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Morgan, MP.
Councillor Stephen Morgan, present, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Gemma New.
Councillor Gemma New, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Robert New.
Councillor Robert New, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Terry Norton.
Councillor Terry Norton, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Scott Peter Harris.
Councillor Scott Peter Harris, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Pitt.
Councillor Steve Pitt, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Will Purvis.
Will Purvis, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Darren Saunders.
Councillor Darren Sanders, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Jeanette Smith.
Jeanette Smith, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Judith Smythe.
Councillor Judith Smythe, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Luke Stubbs.
Luke Stubbs, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Benedict Swan.
Councillor Benedict Swan, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Linda Symes.
Linda Symes, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Claire Oudie.
Councillor Claire Udy, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Gerald Vernon Jackson, CBE.
Present, my Lord Mayor. My Lord Mayor, just for colleagues, I've had a phone call earlier today. I told group leaders about this from a friend of my mum's who may have to go into hospital, and she may have nobody else to take her to hospital apart from me. So if in that circumstance I have to go, I'm sure colleagues will waive standing orders and whatever. But if she has anybody else taken to hospital, I'll have to do that.
Okay, thank you for letting us know, Councillor Gerald Vernon Jackson. Councillor Matthew Winnington.
Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Tom Wood.
Tom Wood, Present Lord Mayor.
And finally, Councillor Neil Young.
Councillor Neil Young, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. So just to recap that, Councillor Lynn Stagg, Councillor Steve Weems and Councillor Hannah Hockaday are currently not present. Do shout if you are here. Okay, I don't hear that. Thank you very much.
And Councillor Coles, of course, Lord Mayor.
Oh, yes, sorry, and Councillor Coles. Thank you for correcting me. Thank you. Can I now please ask the officers to confirm they are present as follows? David Williams, Chief Executive.
David Williams, Chief Executive, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Peter Balfe, City Solicitor.
Peter Balfe, City Solicitor, Present Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Chris Ward, Director of Finances and Resources.
Chris Ward, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Julian Pike, Deputy Director of Finance.
Julian Pike, Deputy Director of Finance, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Stuart Agland, Local Democracy Manager.
Stuart Agland, Present Lord Mayor.
Okay. Vicky Pletus, Senior Local Democracy Officer.
Vicky Pletus, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Peter Smith Parkin, Governance and Democratic Officer.
Peter Smith Parkin, Present Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, everyone. That completes the attendance record for this part of the meeting. Before I move to item 1, members are respectively asked to be available throughout the meeting and to advise me through the chat function if they need to leave the proceedings at any point. Members are also requested to keep their microphones on mute and to only turn these on when they are called to speak. This will limit the amount of background noise, which can be very disruptive. You have also been notified of the noise suppression facility that can be used when you are speaking. Members are requested to keep their cameras turned on at all times. I'm not sure that's true. I think keeping the cameras on where appropriate. Members who wish to speak in any debate should use the chat facility and simply write RTS request to speak so I can deal with it in the order of the request. Other than this purpose, and when informing me if they have to leave the meeting, please do not use the chat facility for anything else. We are not intending to use the raise hand feature, as this does not provide me with an indication of where the request sits in terms of the order for calling members. If there are technical difficulties or need to take confidential advice, we will endeavour to resolve these and where necessary have a brief adjournment, but the meeting can proceed where quorate. With respect to any amendments, etc., that are presented, they will automatically be uploaded onto the web with the council agenda. So just refresh your page each time and you will be able to view it there. And also members have asked that that link be emailed to them. So I'm just making sure everybody's aware of that. Points of orders and points of explanation. Following the increased use of points of order and points of explanation in recent meetings, I thought it might be helpful to restate the rules to ensure all members appreciate their precise application, as they will now be requiring strict adherence to them to facilitate smooth proceedings. 39A, points of order. A councillor may rise of a point of order and shall be entitled to be heard immediately. A point of order shall only relate to an alleged breach of a standing order, and a councillor shall begin by specifying the standing order and then state the way they consider it has been broken. So I will be looking for the actual standing order that was allegedly being breached. So simply quoting standing order 39, which relates to points of order, etc., will not meet that requirement. So standing order 39B, points of explanation. A member who has spoken on any question may make a short explanation of any point, which may have been misunderstood or misinterpreted. The member is entitled to be heard immediately, but must begin by making a succinct statement of what is to be explained. Remarks must then be strictly confined to the explanation. The explanation must be a brief statement of fact and not further argument on the question before the meeting. So I will consequently stop any member from proceeding or continuing with any points of explanation that clearly strays beyond the spirit of this requirement. So now moving on to agenda item 1, declarations of interest. Members, if you have any disclosable pecuniary interests or personal prejudicial interests to declare in the items on the agenda before us, can you please indicate? Right, okay, Stuart, can you see any?
I can see that you've got Councillor Smith has said she's got a right to reply and speak,
yes.
so yes.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Jeanette Smith.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I've got a pecuniary interest because my full-time paid job is with Unison, so if there's any matters that come up within Unison that through the budget, then I will have to declare an interest and leave the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Jeanette Smith, for that. No others? Okay, then. Right, let's move to the minutes. Is it proposed by Councillor Vernon Jackson and seconded by Councillor Jones that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 8th of December 2020 previously circulated with the agenda be confirmed as a correct record? Are the minutes agreed? Councillor Vernon Jackson and Councillor
Agreed.
Donna Jones? Councillor Donna Jones?
Agreed.
Right. Any objections by members? If not, the minutes are agreed by assent. I see no objections. Stuart?
I can't see any objections either, Lord Mayor.
Okay, the proposal is therefore carried. Communications. I've dealt with apologies earlier, so we are now moving to the 2020 Civic Awards. It gives me great pleasure to announce Portsmouth City Council's Civic Awards from 2020. Nominations for these awards were considered by a cross-party group of councillors and representatives of the business and community sectors back in early 2020. It was hoped that we may have been able to present the awards towards the end of the last year, which of course was not possible due to the ongoing pandemic. Today, I will announce the recipients with their respective pictures shown on the screen where available as I do so, and then when possible, I will personally visit each of them to present their award and certificate in person in due course. Excuse me. Civic awards are given to members of the community who have made an outstanding contribution to the life of the city. Some are already well known in Portsmouth, whilst others have made a quieter but nonetheless significant contribution. The 2020 Civic Award recipients are, and Peter, I don't know if you've got a picture, Maria Cole. In recognition of her extensive and varied voluntary work for more than 2 decades with numerous organisations in Portsmouth, Maria's commitment and willingness to devote her time and energy contributing to the local community is well known, and consequently she has often been approached to undertake a number of voluntary roles. These include Patch, a Somerstown community group, Veterans Outreach Service, Somerstown Adventure Playground, the Brook Club, Dickens Fellowship Committee, and Portsmouth Pensioners Committee, amongst others. Maria's voluntary roles have helped many local charities being awarded grants which enhance the lives of local people, particularly in Somerstown, where she supports several community projects. Her work in the community also extends to acting in a supportive and compassionate role as a volunteer with the Veterans Outreach Service. Marie's contribution to a local community is exemplary, and I would also like to wish Maria a very happy birthday. Members, I think, can we all sing happy birthday to Maria? Gerald, do you want to start this off as you say?
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Maria. Happy birthday to you.
Okay.
Well, we're not going to win any prizes for Unison.
Okay, let's hope that doesn't go viral because the singing was good. Well done, Maria. On to the next recipient, Reverend Canon Bob White, in recognition of his outstanding community work given voluntarily over more than 20 years. Born and bred in Portsmouth, he is a vicar of Portsea Parish, but his work extends well beyond the ministry and includes chairing and influencing many local charitable community organisations, including the Hive.
Don't worry about it. I guess it's right. Somebody's going to do that wall first, and then you got time to change.
I think somebody's mic is on. Peter, could you? Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Sorry, let me go back over that. Okay. Born and bred in Portsmouth, he is a vicar of Portsea Parish, but his work extends well beyond the ministry and includes chairing and influencing many local charitable community organisations, including the Hive, the Roberts Centre, Fratton Big Local, Age UK Portsmouth, and Landport Community Centre. He works closely with all local schools, actively promoting education and engaging with the young people of the city, and has also chaired the St Mary's Church Music Foundation, a registered charity seeking to promote and deliver music education to young people. He is also part of Church's Homeless Action, which looks to highlight and improve the plight of those without somewhere safe to sleep. He is seen as a community leader, thought provoker, charismatic manager, and charity champion, inspiring new community champions to carry on his legacy and outreach to the people of Portsmouth. He is a truly inspirational member of his community. Members, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Father Bob. The next recipient, Brenda Tregarthen, in recognition of her tireless and outstanding contribution to the city of Portsmouth, particularly in Portsea, through her many voluntary roles helping to improve lives and her local community. The dedication and commitment as a youth and community and voluntary worker in Portsea spans more than 30 years and includes supporting new and emerging groups. These include the Portsea Events Group that, with her support, knowledge and experience, has positively affected the whole community in Portsea by securing funding into the area. Currently, Brenda is voluntary chair of the Portsea Action Group, which supports local events such as the Portsea Carnival. Brenda is seen as an exceptional role model in her local community, always seeking to improve opportunities and aspirations, and has been instrumental in encouraging individuals of all generations in Portsea to reach their full potential. Thank you, Brenda. Members. Okay, thank you. The next recipient, Sandra Williams, for her outstanding and inspirational contribution to the Portsmouth community over many years. This has included being the chair of Breast Friends of Portsmouth, supporting women with breast cancer, giving her time weekly to the Macmillan Cancer Support and Information Centre at Queen Alexander's Hospital, and supporting the Titchfield Haven for breast cancer, also for serving on the Lord Mayor's fundraising committees and supporting the Miss G fundraising efforts, helping raise hundreds of thousands of pounds for the benefit of multiple local charities. In spite of her own health challenges, she is one of those rare, kind and compassionate people who goes that extra mile in supporting others in her community. Thank you, Sandra. Members. Our next recipient, Michael Woolley, in recognition of all he has done for immigration detainees, refugees, and destitute asylum seekers over the past 20 years, and in recognition of his selfless, steadfast, and outstanding commitment and dedication to helping those in need of legal, social, and financial assistance. This award has already been presented to Mr. Woolley due to his poor health by myself. So thank you, Michael. Thank you. It now gives me great pleasure to announce the Youth Civic Award. The Youth Civic Award seeks to recognise the work that young people undertake and their contribution to society as a whole. The 2020 Youth Civic Award is presented to Jack Ansell for taking an active volunteering and fundraising role in his local community, particularly through his participation in the local National Citizens Service. Firstly, as a participant when he led his team to complete an extraordinarily successful social action project, where the team raised awareness of dementia, and subsequently as part of the NCS Regional Youth Board in the South, when he project managed a continuous social action project to educate the local community on the environmental effects of single-use plastics. Jack is passionate about social action and supporting the young people in his local community, and is a key member of the student ambassador team at Portsmouth College. As part of the Leadership Academy at that college, he gave an inspiring leadership speech at the Portsmouth Head Boy and Head Girl training events alongside Penny Mordaunt MP and local councillors. He is a credit to his community. Well done, Jack. Members. Thank you, members. Congratulations to all our 2020 Civic Award recipients. Well deserved. So moving on, members, I regret to announce the sad passing of Honourable Alderman Stuart Juniper, who died in early January, aged 89. He became a Hampshire County Councillor in 1974, representing Drayton and Farlington for 30 years. It was his contribution to Portsmouth, and in particular his work in education, that saw him achieve his admission to the role of Alderman in 1998. Also, I am sorry to advise of the sad passing in early January of Selwyn Sheville, who served with many years on the Haifa Friendship Committee. I also regret to inform you that John Stock has recently passed away. John joined the council in the 60s working in the committee section, and in 1994 he became the committee services manager until his retirement in 2003. In 2005, John received a Civic Award in recognition of his outstanding contribution to local government, civic life and special events in Portsmouth during his 43 years service as an officer of the City Council, and for his continuing voluntary contribution to the community. Our thoughts are with their respective families at this difficult time. Thank you, members. We now move on to item 5, written deputations from the public under Standing Order 24. I have not received any written deputations for this meeting. Stuart, have there been any late ones?
Lord Mayor, no late deputations have been received.
Thank you. So moving on to item 5, appointments. Again, I have not been notified of any for today's meeting. Stuart, are you aware of any late ones?
There are no late ones that I've been notified of, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. So item 6, urgent business. Again, I have not been notified of any urgent business for this meeting. In which case, we will now move on to agenda item 7, as nobody has said anything further. Item 7, to receive and consider the budget, council tax, medium-term financial forecast and capital programme recommendations from Cabinet from its meeting held on the 2nd of February 2021. Members, as previously circulated and recirculated in the chamber today, are the recommendations of the Cabinet which met on the 2nd of February. The budget report was also previously circulated. 1. Further to the letter of the 1st of February on the procedure for dealing with the budget debate, I will deal with the Cabinet's recommendations by calling out the minute number, pausing for any member objections. You will be aware that just one report dealing with both the budget and the capital programme. So minute 12, Portsmouth City Council budget and council tax 2021-22 and medium-term budget forecast and the capital programme. Members.
Object, Lord Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, in which case, as objections have been raised, the leader of the council, Councillor Vernon Jackson, will need to move his Cabinet's recommendations on the budget and council tax and the capital programme And if you can also say who is seconding that. Just to remind members, the speaking limit does not apply to group leaders on these budget items. Leader, I now call upon you to move the Cabinet's recommendations and name your seconder and seconder to affirm that. Leader.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm happy to move the proposal from the Cabinet about the budget, council tax level and capital programme, and Councillor Steve Pitt, my able Deputy Leader, will be seconding that.
Councillor Pitt.
Happy to confirm that I'm seconding, Lord Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Leader. So at this point, Stuart, is the leader to speak to it?
Yes, it's now for the leader to present his budget recommendations, Lord Mayor. Okay.
Thank you, Leader. If you would like to present your budget recommendations, thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In this speech, I will set out some of the work that Lib Dem administration has been doing over the last year and the budget proposals set out in the paperwork for today. I'd like to start with my usual thanks. Firstly, to the finance team at the City Council, Chris Ward and Julian Pike in particular, who have worked hard to turn in a budget that is sensible and prudent, but also one facing many less cuts than many other councils across the country. I'd like to also put on record my thanks to all members of the Cabinet who've worked so hard over this year and achieved so much in such difficult times. Without the hard work and dedication of the staff who work for the City Council, none of the decisions we make as councillors would have been implemented. The staff of the City Council have worked tirelessly for local residents during the pandemic, and I will take this opportunity to put on record my thanks to each and every one of them for their dedication, hard work and professionalism. But finally, I need to put on record my thanks to Steve Pitt. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a sin to confess, and the sin is plagiarism. Steve's speech at the Shaping Conference a couple of weeks ago went down so well that I've nicked lots of it. So my apologies to colleagues who were at that meeting and at that conference, and you may be able to spot parts of Steve's speech. But I thought, if something is so good, why not nick bits of it? My Lord Mayor, when the Lib Dems returned to the administration of this council, we did so with three core aims. That was that we would listen to local residents, that we'd care for the most vulnerable, and we'd run the City Council's finances in a competent way. There's always more to do, but it's absolutely clear that we've achieved this, and my thanks to every member of the administration for the part they played in this. Whilst the government have failed to provide the financial support councils need and have forced cuts on councils, there are two figures that I think are crucial. The first is in children, families and education. Over the past 3 years, we have grown this budget by 28%, a £7 million growth to look after the children in this city that need support. Contrast that which took place under the previous Conservative administration and their budgets between 2015 and the one they proposed in 2018, which saw this budget cut. There's a similar picture in health, wellbeing and social care. Under this administration, we've seen a growth in this budget from 41.7 million to 49.4 million, a growth of 18.5% in 3 years, an increase of £7.5 million. Yet in the 3 years of the Conservative administration between 15 and 18, they did increase the budget, but by £68,300, less than the rate of inflation. I'm really proud that we've turned this around. Investing in support to the most vulnerable is at the core of our values. We as Lib Dems opposed and voted against this real terms cuts to these services that were a product of a Conservative administration, voted in and supported by the votes of Conservative councillors, Labour councillors and UKIP councillors. For the last 17 years, I've delivered the budget speech on behalf of the Lib Dem group. This speech may well be my last in this capacity, so I may want to look backwards a little. COVID-19 has had an enormous impact on all of our lives. Many of us had to get used to the new normal of working at home, used to spending large parts of our day on Zoom or on Teams, and trying hard to make sure that we continue to live our lives as best we can. We have faced varying degrees of challenge. Some of us have had to overcome the virus, some have had to support family members through it, and very sadly, some of us have lost loved ones. The depth of the tragedy is not yet fully known, and we still have difficult times ahead. Throughout this crisis, our thoughts have been with those at risk, those on the front line, and those who've lost their lives. Through all, there's been a constant reason to be proud of our city. Our health and care workers have been and continue to be our heroes, and our social care teams, both public and private, have finally been recognised that they've always deserved what they've always reserved for the amazing work that they do, always putting people first. I salute every single key worker who is taking personal risk to support our community through this crisis. Our volunteers, coordinated by the Hive under the leadership of Lou Wilders and Father Bob, have achieved incredible things. They've given up huge amounts of their time to support our most vulnerable residents. Their contribution to our city has been greater than ever before, and we owe them a huge debt of thanks. Local businesses stepped up to offer cooked meals, to donate PPE, help with deliveries and donate supplies. So many of them have been ready and willing to go above and beyond to help their communities, and this is something each and every one of us should be hugely proud of. Thank you. Individuals have joined together to forge online communities and local support groups, often cooking a meal for a neighbour or fetching a prescription, or just being there for their friends and neighbours. Our city has grown stronger as a result, and the myth that there is no society has been well and truly busted. The council had to adapt quickly to the task in front of it, and I'm proud of all the officers, from the cleaners and the parking crew to the team leaders and directors, for the way they've done above and gone beyond and above everything that they should have done to support our communities through this pandemic. We've conducted residents' research at the City Council with 2 large surveys. The overwhelming majority of residents said that they trust the City Council as a reliable source of information, far more so than they trust the government. And this is testament to the work that has gone on into keeping everybody informed and updated, often in challenging circumstances, as we found our way through this crisis. We made a very important decision early in the crisis, and it's one I think we should be very proud of. We knew that the food banks were under pressure due to the pandemic, and people panic buying, limiting people's ability to donate the supplies which were rationed by the supermarkets. And we stepped straight in to fund the Hive to guarantee that food deliveries would be maintained. In the weeks that follow, through council, donations and sponsorships, no one who needed support was turned away. The city came together to support the most vulnerable in their time of need, and this is something we'll never forget. Their support continues to this day. The work that we've done in the anti-poverty strategy has been very important, and there's a paper coming to the next meeting of the Cabinet, but just to give you some highlights of things that we've done. So 5 or 6 points. We've been funding money advice services and running an income maximisation campaign to help residents ensure that they receive everything they're entitled to, deal with problem debts and reduce their household bills. We've been tackling fuel poverty through the switched on Portsmouth offer, including energy vouchers for people on prepayment meters. We provided supermarket vouchers for all children entitled to free school meals in the Christmas and spring holidays at the cost of £375,000. We provided a discretionary grant scheme in partnership with the Hive to help residents fed, using DWP COVID Winter Grant Scheme funding, including white goods, warm clothes, bedding, curtains, and over 200 grant referrals have already been received. We've been funding a scheme to provide internet devices and connectors to help school students and vulnerable adults get online. We're providing support to local food banks and soup kitchens in their work feeding people in need, including funding to restock when they had the biggest spike in demand in the summer. An additional £55,000 has been funding the discretionary test and trace support payment after the ring-fence government funding for the discretionary payments was exhausted in January. I think, colleagues, you'll be proud of that work. But we've done more than that. We've got everybody in, renting hotels to give shelter to our homeless community, something that's been a long-lasting positive impact and it's evolved into council deciding to purchase 3 buildings to provide stable temporary accommodation to our homeless community until we can help and support them to move on to long-term homes, offering counselling and support to help them rebuild their lives. We stepped in when the government failed to act and ensure meal vouchers should be available over Christmas and February half term for all children on free school meals. We've stepped in quickly to set up the region's first business support line. The team have supported thousands of local businesses with advice on various grants and loans, staffing the phone lines from 7 in the morning to 7 at night, and ensuring well over £40 million got to those businesses that need help so badly. We continue to operate every council service where possible, and will continue to do so. My thanks again to all the staff and those across the city who are helping Portsmouth to navigate this awful crisis, together with such determination and commitment. Despite 2020 being a year in which so many of us had many reasons to want to forget, it did also deliver some positives, some of which I've already described. What I truly hope will be a lasting legacy is the strength of relationship forged between the City Council and the partners that we work with. I'd like to highlight the amazing work achieved by the partnership between Shaping, Crowdfunder UK and the Council, helping local businesses, many of them who'd fallen through the cracks of government support, helping 20 of them to complete their fundraising projects and survive to thrive. The Pay It Forward scheme was one of only 4 council-led schemes in the whole country, focused on combating the impact of COVID-19 on businesses, and seeing the success of the Portsmouth scheme, the Solent launched their own version of the scheme, helping more businesses across the region and in Portsmouth. We also helped to set up the Digital Enablement Programme to get digital services for those who are isolated and to school children who didn't have access to learning through digital platforms at home. The Council has pioneered the work of getting COVID testing into all nurseries and childminding locations in the city, so staff here are included in the testing programme. Our recognition of the pressures on education show an investment in this budget this year of £3.5 million to build new classrooms for children with special educational needs. Our emerging project we have passionate about is the development of the Council's social value policy, which will be more ambitious and wider reaching than those developed by either Preston or Salford. I hope that in years to come, everybody will be talking about the Portsmouth model of social value. Looking ahead, our critical work has continued at pace. Jane Lemaire and her team have continued to provide help and support to get people back into work through the pandemic, and now working with the Job Entry Targeted Support Scheme, which went live in October, helping adults affected by COVID and adding to the established work and health programmes, which helps the long-term unemployed back to work. Jane also leads on the Kickstart programme, coordinating a number of organisations to offer paid work to young people for 6-month placements. The Council is already committed to over 50 Kickstart placements across its departments. We'll be paying them the real living wage as laid down by the Living Wage Foundation, topping up the government-funded payments. The team are working closely with the DWP, with Shaping and with skills providers to make sure that Portsmouth Skills and Workforce Strategy, published in November, is a tool to support businesses and individuals as we look forward towards recovery. One of the impacts of COVID has been the acceleration in the decline of the high street retail, primarily impacting on long-established chains whose model no longer works in the age of online shopping. However, the City Council are determined to do all we can to influence change and evolution on our high streets, and lever in external funding is essential to do that. Having initially planned to announce the awards in September, the government finally revealed the beneficiaries of the Future High Streets Fund on Boxing Day. Portsmouth received 66% of the amounts we'd bid for, which meant 3.1 million for Commercial Road and 3.8 million for Fratton Road. In Fratton, we're working with building owners to purchase and redevelop older retail space to improve the local shopping experience on ground floors, as well as enabling community use, office space and affordable housing above. There are also other improvements to the public realm in Fratton Road. In Commercial Road, we will now follow on from recent improvements that we've seen the relocation of the market by working with building owners to purchase and redevelop empty retail space, keeping a retail or activity space on the ground floor and utilising the upper floors as office space and affordable housing. More details to both these schemes in the weeks and months ahead. I also want to let you know that we've had a bid to the European Regional Development Fund to open co-working space in the city centre dedicated to growing and supporting small and medium-sized enterprises, and we're hoping that we're successful so that we can provide a great modern space and create new jobs. In the future, we need our high streets to be about far more than just shops. I'm delighted by the plans that are progressing in Southsea to bring back both the former Debenhams and former Knight and Lee sites back into use, with plans for a health hub, independent retail, a 4-star hotel, food and beverage offer, all keeping those ground floors active and helping to drive footfall to the existing shops. New housing on the upper floors of Debenhams will bring more residents into the heart of Southsea and further help to support local retail. There are towns and cities across the UK which are looking at envy that such huge private investment has come to Southsea so soon after the stores closed, and I look forward to seeing the results of the project led both by National, Regional and that group. Our council teams have worked hard across reopening High Street project to support businesses across the city, and their work in Palmerston Road south over the summer has proved a great success. And local businesses are working with the council both here and in Castle Road. We're all delighted by the news that Portsmouth was announced to be the most entrepreneurial city in the Instant Offices report of 2020, something later mirrored in other reports, showing a 33% increase in new businesses being launched. We also recently received updated Centre for Cities report, showing that of the 63 cities in the UK, Portsmouth was the 17th strongest economy, 3 places above Southampton, and demonstrating that our city has, as far as least, proved to be resilient during these difficult times. Before the pandemic, we were seen as one of the top rates of GVA growth in the country, and we hope that all our efforts to protect local firms will leave us well placed to recover quickly and get back to where we were last March. I'm pretty proud that the City Council has decided to turn its back on the very lowest pay and now pays the real living wage. Our commitment is to embed this into the City Council so that not only our direct employees get the real living wage, but that all our contractors pay the real living wage as well. This means working through all our contracts as they come up for renewal over the next few years, and making sure that everyone working for the council, either directly or indirectly, receives the real living wage for work they do for Portsmouth City Council. We could have done this with an additional set of cuts of £3 million from the main council budget and almost £1 million from the council housing budget, but this would have made major cuts to frontline services that people have told us they value. We will instead plan to do this over time. Work in housing has shown that a route to reduce their costs from 900,000 to around 300,000. I hope the same work can reduce the sum needed from the main council budgets, and this year that Portsmouth becomes the first upper tier council in Hampshire to become accredited as a living wage employer. The Living Wage Foundation credits organisations and councils to be an accredited living wage employer, as long as they've got a plan to make sure that all their contracts over time mean that people are paid the real living wage. It is good for people working on low wage jobs, especially in the care sector. It also spreads out to other workers in other sectors in the city and pushes up the wages of many people when they're paid the minimum. The contrast with our predecessor administration cannot have been greater. In 2014, in the last Lib Dem budget of our previous time in power, we put in money to make Portsmouth City Council pay the real living wage. Figures from Natasha Edmonds, City Council's Director of Corporate Resources, show that under Conservative administration, workers on the lowest wages had their wages frozen, while workers on higher wages got pay rises. To quote, the types of roles impacted were the lowest paid, as you would expect, who are also in some of the most critical frontline services. Types of roles affected: cleaning operatives, adult social care day services for vulnerable people, residential care for adults and children in various roles, care assistants, housekeepers, cooks, school crossing patrols, passenger assistants, libraries, customer services. The numbers of staff affected each year: in 2016, there were 234 staff affected. In 2017, 257. There was a significant difference between the City Council's annual salary across a range of roles and the real living wage equivalent at the time of 2016 and 17. The average pay difference in 2016 was £700. The average pay difference in 2017, 730. This is something for which the City Council should hang its head in shame. When we returned to power, we reintroduced the real living wage to direct employees. Now we will extend it to our contractors as well. These have been difficult times for cultural industries, and I want to make it clear that our government needs to do much more to help protect our live music, visual arts, theatre sectors if they're to survive. We cannot lose these jewels in our economy. Our music and theatre industries are worth billions to the UK each year and amongst the very best in the world. Our festivals are global icons, so many freelancers, technicians, actors, artists and musicians have seen their incomes wiped out and have not been able to access the grant system. We will continue to make the case for more help to be given to our creatives, and locally we've done all we can to support our ventures, including announcing that we will be acquiring the freehold of the new Theatre Royal to ensure it remains a theatre for future generations. We've also helped to support our local attractions through the heavily discounted advertising on our visitor guide for 2021 and working with the LEP on plans for a new focus on developing tourism across the region to maximise the new staycation phenomenon being driven by COVID. Remember, over 20,000 local jobs were supported across the cultural, creative, digital and tourism sectors in our city pre-COVID, and we need to ensure that we do all we can to retain them. One of the highlights in 2020 was the emergence of Portsmouth Creates, which Steve Pitt has worked hard to fund and support. I'm sure he will say more about it later. It was his intervention with a call to the manager of the empty Debenham store in Southsea that saw the creation of a COVID-secure We Create market for artists. The feedback from them was that several of them have made up the income they lost through the year, and who will forget the queues of people trying to get in? Thanks, Steve, and the whole team at Portsmouth Creates. Yeah. Despite all the pressures of 2020, there are a number of exciting initiatives now making real progress and giving me real hope that we can come out of the pandemic with ambition and optimism. Health and well-being will be a key focus over the next few years, and having leisure facilities fit for the 21st century will be key to ensuring local people can access activities all year round. Some of our leisure centres were in an embarrassing state, and we are determined that decades of sticking plasters over the cracks have to end. Austerity has led to ongoing underinvestment, with only essential maintenance taking place at the Pyramids, Eastleigh Swimming Pool, Wimbledon Park Sports Centre, were all either at the near or at the end of their economic life. In response, we've repurposed the Pyramids, which will open in the spring as a giant adventure play centre for young families and early teens, and a new gym, which will be the best 5-star gym at 3-star prices in the area. It will also mean the end of having to fund a £700,000 a year loss at the Pyramids. The public have decided that they support combining Wimbledon Park Sports and Eastleigh Pool into one new centre on the site of the Eastleigh Community Centre in Brownsbury Park. And the Lib Dem team running the council have worked hard to assemble £10.5 million to deliver 2 new pools, gym, sports centre, music studio and community centre. And we expect to secure an extra £2 million for that from Sport England. This year's budget will also see us investing £615,000 in cash and £800,000 in borrowing to support 2 schemes in the city, which between them will lever in an additional £4 million from the Football Foundation to provide new football facilities at Moneyfields and King George V in Cosham. It was great fun chairing a conference for the Football Foundation, and I wore a Pompey shirt throughout, which I think people appreciated. We're continuing our commitment to ensuring South Sea Sea Defences by allocating another £200,000 on top of the £200,000 we allocated last year towards art installations, play space and much more along our iconic seafront. We'll be seeking external funding to help ensure South Sea seafront is reborn and remains as valued by future generations as it has been by all of us, especially during the pandemic. We're spending £100 million buying back former council properties to reallocate those that are on our waiting list and ensure local families have decent homes. This is groundbreaking work that other councils are following. We do not have the capacity to build enough council housing for the need, but by building and buying back, we're making much more progress than other councils. We are investing in our local school buildings and additional places urgently needed for children with special educational needs. And we've already increased the children's and families budget to ensure we're already protecting our most vulnerable young people. And this includes a new digital support tool that was launched last week to enhance mental health support in a way that young people themselves have told us they want it to be delivered. The care that people receive in their own homes and when they need residential care is crucial to the health of residents and to the survival of the NHS. The pandemic has shown yet again incredible close working between the NHS and the city here in Portsmouth, and that has borne fruit. When I've talked to paramedics in the city, they tell me about the excellent work done to get residents home and out of hospital in Portsmouth, and contrast that with services in Hampshire. The pandemic has taught us that transmission of the virus out of hospitals and into care homes was devastating. The work to create the Gunwharf unit at Harry Sotnick House has been a key part of breaking that chain of infection and protecting the most vulnerable in society. There is a savings within this proposal in the wellbeing and social care portfolio, and I've had a briefing here from Andy Biddle that I thought I should share with members. The context of these savings is that care and support in care homes in Portsmouth is provided both through Portsmouth City Council managed and independently owned and managed care homes. Around 20% of the places for residential and nursing homes are provided by the City Council, and the remaining 80% by the independent sector. In the autumn of 2019, survey work was undertaken by the Adult Social Care Finance colleagues with independent care providers to gather information about the costs of providing care and analysis, the costs of PCC in-house provision, and also carried out at the same time. The average unit cost for the independent sector was £770 per week per bed. The average cost in PCC residential sector was £1,200, although this is much lower than several other local authorities. Under Section 5 of the Care Act, all councils are required to promote the efficient and effective operation of a market service to meet care and support needs. Under Section 48 of the Care Act, local authorities also have a responsibility to step in and meet need in case of market failure. Across the independent sector in Portsmouth during COVID, we've seen a decrease in occupancy levels across care homes, and market representatives inform us regularly about their concerns over vacancies. We've seen an individual approach this week talking to a decreased occupancy following an outbreak and asked to consider financial help. So the rationale is that the placements in independent sector cost us less than our own provision. Secondly, the increased placements would aim to affect the introduction of further stability into the market at a time of disruption. Thirdly, with Shearwater would use the vacant floor for an activity room for the remaining residents, would be able to turn their floor back into bedded capacity should we need to provide urgent case in case a private care home closed. There are no current residents who would need to leave Shearwater. Our aim would be to redeploy staff into existing vacancies and reduce our reliance on temporary care worker staff, though we cannot guarantee that there will be no redundancies, and to put the numbers in the worst case. We avoid redundancy costs, this will be great, and it would help us to be able to rely less on agency workers. We have a mature re-enablement pathway in Portsmouth that's operated for many years based on a jointly run Portsmouth Rehabilitation and Re-enablement Team and the Victory Unit. Placements from hospital to care homes will be needed in the short term, but can prevent people regaining full independence. Our aim would be to review the pathway in light of the additional discharge to assess bedded options that have come on stream during COVID and ensure that we're seeing more people come through their enablement and less move into long-term packages of care from hospital. The opportunity to have more time to work with people and be able to return them home, but need a short period after discharge to get back to their independence should be taken. We should also see more people return home with a lower level of support needed than those who are discharged without this opportunity. My Lord Mayor, just to continue then. So the council has had a proud history of investing in future prosperity of our residents. Over the past few years, we've seen investment into the port and into Portico. The decision to invest in Lakeside brought us 120 acres in the city, supporting 4,000 jobs. Our recent decision to buy the Sainsbury's site in the city centre unlocks development in the city centre and the ability to build a city centre road to reduce air pollution, improve cycle routes into the city and reduce traffic queues. As a business owner, the City Council has a long and successful history, but that's sometimes meaning saying no instead of yes. The citizens of Bristol and Nottingham will each have to pay off the debts of at least £30 million flowing from their council's decisions to create companies to enter into the domestic energy supply market. Luckily here, the cries of our Conservative and Labour colleagues to do the same thing were ignored, and Victory Energy was not allowed to run up these levels of losses. The business case was superficially attractive, and I have to admit, even I was taken in for a time. But closer examination showed that the finances and business plan just didn't add up. Luckily, the people of Portsmouth have been saved from these huge losses from the cuts that would have followed. If we carried on with Victory Energy, we'd be looking here at cuts of 10 million a year, not 1 million a year, because people were taken in by the business plan. Instead, we've been able to double the number of community wardens and invest in additional CCTV cameras to keep local residents safe. Finally, I want to turn to the issue of climate change and the climate emergency. Although the last year has seen a necessary focus on our priorities as we've concentrated on keeping the city as safe as possible, work continues to address the climate agenda and will now move forward as we hopefully emerge from the shadow of the virus in the coming months. We've secured funding to make long-awaited improvements to the Eastern Road cycle lane, removing a major pinch point and making journeys safer. We've secured tens of millions of pounds through the Transforming Cities Fund, which will improve a number of key junctions across the city, improving safety, traffic flows, and more importantly, air quality. These changes will significantly improve bus journey times so that once people move back onto public transport, again, the bus is a more attractive option, reducing car use. We will be a pilot city for the properly regulated e-scooter trial, which will see us work with government to evaluate how these vehicles can play a key role in reducing future car use. We plan to invest £1 million through the city's capital budget in a scheme that will improve cycling and walking infrastructure. The successful trial recycling scheme introduced on the seafront last year will be expanded, and our flagship food waste recycling scheme will double in September to cover 2/3 of the city before completing the citywide rollout in 2020. We're progressing plans to build our own anaerobic digester, take all the city's food waste and that from neighbouring local authorities, which will not only create biofuels and fertilisers, but will generate an income to support other services. In this budget, we're doubling the number of homes offered food waste recycling at home to cover 2/3 of the houses in Portsmouth. When this scheme is covered the whole of the city, 5,000 tonnes of food a year will be taken out of the waste stream and recycled. To be clear, in Hampshire, it is only Lib Dem run councils that provide food waste recycling. No Labour council and no Conservative-led council does this. Our council-owned port will emerge from the pandemic determined to become Britain's first carbon-neutral port. We are recognised as one of the country's leading local authorities on renewable energy, recently launching the UK's largest Tesla Powerwall, using cutting-edge tech to store energy from our solar arrays, and only this week it was revealed that the City Council is the largest local authority investor into solar power in the country over the last 6 years, investing over £5 million. The Council's energy team has launched a new initiative to help more people access solar from their homes, and only this week secured a further £4 million in investment to support the expansion of this project. We've identified almost 20,000 homes in the city that would benefit from solar panels, and be working with these households to dramatically cut Portsmouth's carbon footprint. We continue to plant hundreds of new trees across the city's parks, and the 50,000 trees at Horsesea Island have taken well and will eventually transform the site into a country park. We set aside more money to invest in green initiatives in coming years and work in a partnership with the City Council's Climate Action Board to launch a crowdfunder scheme that will empower local communities to bid for funding from a new fund to deliver greening and environmental improvements across the city. There is, of course, so much more to do. Portsmouth is an historic city with narrow streets, and as an island, solving the big issues such as traffic congestion, which impacts negatively on our quality of life, will never be easy. But we have to find our ways to achieve a big reduction in our
Leader, you've muted yourself.
My apology. Has that been, Steve, has that been on for at least the last half an hour?
No,
unfortunately not, Leader.
Seconds. Please go
There
back.
is-
Seconds.
The government-imposed clean air scheme will come into force in the west of the city later this year, and is a stark reminder that we have to make progress quickly or our economy will suffer along with our health. I urge every business to think of ways we can join our efforts and help us reduce our emissions quickly back to safe levels and beyond. We're all in this together, and together we can make a difference. We'll also continue to lobby government to support Portsmouth and recognise the unique challenges we face as an island city. And so there is much achieved, and there remains much to achieve. It's been a privilege to be the council leader here, who's been in the role for the longest. 13 years is a long stint. My thanks to councillors from all parties and all groups for the work you've put into making the city a great place to live in, to visit and to work in. We may disagree on some things, but on the majority we have a common line of supporting what is best for Portsmouth. My view has always been that the test of any administration is not what we say but what we do. At times there have been those who sat on the sidelines and lobbed in criticisms, but we've weathered them and gone on to deliver a huge range of things for the people of the city. The test we set ourselves was to be a listening, caring and competent city council. We've been financially competent. While other councils have gone bust, we have been prudent with the council's finances. The government's not kept its word to fully protect our council's finances, but we've weathered the storm and put aside £11.9 million for additional costs for COVID. And yet, we've been able to put aside £3 million from underspends last year to make sure there is money for major capital projects next year. Over the last 17 years, I've had to make cuts to council budgets under both Labour, Conservative and coalition governments. We've had to remove over £100 million of expenditure because of good, sensible financial planning. The 3 unitary councils in this area have different savings targets. Here in Lib Dem run Portsmouth, the saving targets have been £1 million. In Conservative run the Isle of Wight, the target is £3.5 million. And in Labour run Southampton, the cut is £4 million. Good financial management pays dividends. We've listened to residents, whether it's been the desire to invest more in services for the vulnerable, to giving parking zones to communities that ask for them, to investing in leisure facilities in Cosham and in Eastney. We've always been open to working with others on this council, and I'd like to record my thanks to Councillor Claire Udy and Councillor Jeanette Smith for their constructive work with us on this budget. Whilst we're unable to accept the amendment as drafted and the potential risks associated with some of the savings proposals, I'm able to give you a commitment that your spending proposals can be accommodated this year. They're the expansion of the For Us project for an additional member of staff at £25,000 and the Hive Community Fund in brackets Recovery Project and Mental Health Project for £225,000. We plan to fund these this coming year up to £250,000 from a combination of the use of the remaining sums available in the voluntary sector capacity and transition fund, the Leaders Initiative budget and the Cabinet Reserve. The same offer was there for both Conservative and Labour groups, and I'm disappointed that this offer has not been taken up. In terms of caring for the most vulnerable in society, the list of the achievements is long. We've increased the budget for children's services from 30.1 million to 30.85 million, a 28% increase in just 3 years. We've increased the budget for adult social care and health from 41.7 million to 49.4 million in the last 3 years, an 18.5% increase. We've kept the youth and play service, where in Hampshire they've abolished them. In fact, we've even extended it. We've brought in the real living wage for our lowest paid workers, and we're rolling that out to our contractors as well. We've connected more solar panels than any other council in the country. This is a record to be proud of. This administration and this budget have shown that we listen to local residents, that we're competent with public money, and that we care for the most vulnerable. I commend it to you now for its record for the past and the promise of more to come in future years. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. And can I just say a point to all leaders? You've predisposed that this might be your last one. I just want to thank all leaders of all parties who have helped me during this year. So I will say that I'm sure we'll speak more in the closed session. So I now call upon the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Donna Jones, to respond without time limit. Councillor Donna Jones, are there any amendments to be proposed, seconded and circulated through publication on the council website?
There are. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd be grateful if it can be circulated at the end of my speech.
Okay. Obviously it will not be feasible to display any budget amendments on the screen for this meeting. Is that correct, Peter?
Yes, that's correct, Lord Mayor.
Okay. In which case, you've heard that to publish it after Councillor Donna Jones has spoken. Councillor Donna Jones, do you want to propose and who your seconder is? Would you mind saying that?
Yes, I'd like to propose the Conservative amendment, and it will be seconded by Councillor Luke Stubbs.
Councillor Luke Stubbs?
Formally seconded, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Donna Jones, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'd like to propose to the Council the Conservative Group's financial proposals for our revenue and capital budgets combined for the financial year covering the 1st of April 2021 to the 31st of March 2022. Today, I'm going to formally propose on behalf of the Conservative Group a cash incentive to every home in the city, meaning that there will be no increase in council tax for the forthcoming year as a consequence of the pandemic. We'd like to also introduce free parking in district shopping centres to aid the recovery of the high street post-COVID and to support the thousands of people in Portsmouth who work in the retail sector. We are also proposing a one-off grant of £500 to every licensed taxi badge holder living in the city PO1 to PO6, in addition to the ARG funding that's being worked through at the moment, expected to be £400 per month, backdated from November to March, meaning that the combined total will come to £2,500. We'd like to propose the creation of 4 additional community wardens to tackle antisocial behaviour across the city, factoring in the rise in this type of nuisance and crime during the pandemic. We will also go further to create dedicated dog exercise areas in parks and to provide equipment to reflect the huge growth in dog ownership in the city during the pandemic. We will introduce 2 new sites for outdoor gym equipment, demonstrating our commitment to support the people of this city in enjoying the outdoor space whilst getting fit in a safe way. We propose the installation of additional lighting in parks where antisocial behaviour is a reoccurring problem, as well as CCTV in College Park. We have identified both the revenue and capital to install additional litter bins at locations across the city, helping to make Portsmouth a cleaner and more pleasant place to live. We propose the planting of additional flowers for verge hardening in Copner Ward and electric signs reminding HGV lorry drivers of the weight restrictions on Anchorage Road on the approach to the city's largest and busiest industrial estate. We have found the funds to support the much needed introduction of one-way roads in Paulsgrove to ease the parking pressure and to make those narrow streets safer. Following on from this, we will create a pedestrian crossing at Nailsworth Road in Paulsgrove. And finally, we have allocated the budget to create additional traffic calming measures for the Highbury estate in Cosham Ward. Lord Mayor, this has been an extraordinary year and one that none of us will forget. We have all lived through history with a global pandemic that has killed over 2 million people around the world. Sadly, Portsmouth people have not escaped the effects of this highly contagious disease. Who would have thought 12 months ago that we would be holding meetings online, that we would not be able to go into the homes of family members and friends and do simple things such as hugging your parents or your children if they live in a different house? Who would have thought these things would be prohibited? One of the hardest things for people in this city has undoubtedly been losing loved ones, either through COVID or other illnesses, and not being able to be there to hold their hand and spend their last few days and hours with them. The real cost of this pandemic is not a financial one, it's the heartbreak that can never be recovered. As a council, our staff have had to work in the most unbelievable of circumstances. The machine of local government, and in this case, the sheer size and brevity of the services that we offer at Portsmouth City Council, have meant people have had to change their jobs. Their roles have been redesigned, they've been deployed, they've spent hours and in some cases days away from their families, whilst having the burden of the fact the council is not a business that can choose to furlough and close down. We all owe a huge debt of gratitude to the 3,000 plus staff that all play their part in keeping the giant machine of local government in the city of Portsmouth moving forward. I want to say a very personal thank you to each and every one of them. This year, meetings, including the budget process, has been different. That's why my approach as leader of the opposition is a very different one this year to any speech I have made before on such occasions. I have read the Section 151 officer's report and commend him and the excellent finance team for presenting to us the facts and the financial landscape as it is now in 2021. Today you will see in the Conservative budget amendment that we have not deleted any lines in the administration's budget. We have not replaced any of the capital projects proposed today, but we have sought to add to it and where we can improve it. I hope the administration can recognise and also place value on the approach taken by the Conservative group as the largest party in opposition. We acknowledge the need to increase the council tax by 4.99% this year. We will include this in our revenue amendment, but for this year only to reflect the pandemic and the extreme hardship that people are facing, particularly those that have lost jobs and business owners who have had to furlough their staff and themselves. We will give them a one-off cash grant to the value of the 4.99% increase. We will do this by disposing of a piece of farmland known as Cabbage Patch Row. Ideally, the council through the cabinet would dispose of this land with planning permission in place, which would significantly increase its value, and that would be my strong preference. But in the absence of a fully worked up planning scheme, the anticipated capital receipt as of today is £6 million. We will use this capital receipt to reduce the revenue capital transfer of £5,397,500 as proposed in the budget. Where there are ongoing revenue costs associated to the capital projects I have mentioned, which total some £17,500, we propose a reduction in the leader support grant, which is currently £21,000. We note the administration's budget and the detail to create a new leisure centre in the south of the city. Following the closure of the pyramids and the value placed by local people on staying fit and healthy, especially for the city's children, we welcome the proposals and thank the council and the culture and leisure officers for the briefing they have given to our group. I did contact the leader of the council and request a meeting with him to discuss the capital budget, to which he did agree, but in actual fact the Culture and Leisure staff answered our questions. So thank you to the leader of the council for offering to make himself available. In terms of our proposals, we have obviously, as I've stated, made a number of indications of what we would spend the money on. One of the things that we would spend money on is the creation of those additional wardens. We place great value on supporting communities and the taxpayers of this city when there are issues such as fly tipping. And in my own ward, just a couple of days ago at the bus stop outside the Mountbatten Centre, the window, the large pane of glass in the bus stop had been smashed and there was glass all over the place. I reported that, but having more community wardens, eyes and ears around the city, we know they play a huge part in the community cohesion, particularly in some of our more challenging areas in the city. We have also proposed introducing free parking in town centres to aid the recovery post-COVID of the many people, the thousands of people in this city that work in the retail sector. And we appreciate that where people have to pay and display, it can be a barrier when they can park free of charge in some of the larger out-of-town shopping retail parks that have been created over the last 5 or 6 years. We have a duty to protect our retail shopping centres, and that's why having a period where there will be free parking in the district shopping centres around the city will massively go towards helping the recovery for many people, the thousands of people in Portsmouth that work in the retail sectors. And finally, we feel quite sad about the taxi trade. We feel sad that they don't feel supported by us as a local authority, in spite of the fact that the government have given large amounts of money to councils across the country, including Portsmouth, through the discretionary grant system. I'm pleased that officers have listened to the call that I made 2 weeks ago, urging councillors and officers, the administration, to review the conditions of that discretionary scheme. We were promised a meeting last week to discuss that. Sadly, I've heard nothing back on this. I've not been included in any conversations, but as always, I found out via the press and also through taxi drivers what's actually going on. I can say as a member of the opposition in Portsmouth on the council, that's a very disappointing position to be in, and I think it's a poor reflection on the administration, but I do welcome the news that there is a proposal being worked up to support taxi drivers to the tune of £400 per month backdated. I do think it would be a very sad situation if Portsmouth City Council ended up not giving out the grant money, as it has failed to do so far, and having to return that money to the Treasury, which would be a great shame when there are people in this city that are struggling who are self-employed. I'd also like to mention the food waste recycling scheme, which I very much welcome, that 2/3 of the city by the end of this next financial year will now be part of the food waste recycling scheme. And this is something that was started under the Conservative administration by Councillor Robert New, who was our cabinet member. And I think that, you know, I'd like to place on record my thanks to Councillor Robert New for starting this, and to the current cabinet member for the extension to the scheme. I think it should be commended. Slightly disappointed that there hasn't been any movement with regards to beach buggies now. It's coming up for 3 years in May since the Liberal Democrats replaced us as the administration running the council. And we put money into our 2018 budget. We also put money into our 2019 budget amendment. I appreciate there's been issues going on with regards to the sea defences, but there are still things that could have been done to facilitate and aid disabled people getting into the water and being able to enjoy the sea, particularly when we had such a record hot summer last year. In terms of cycling storage, this time last year, the Conservatives put forward in our budget amendment additional monies for cycle storage around the city, and I'm delighted that that idea has been carried forward, and we now have new bike racks going in to residential streets to aid people getting around our lovely city by bike to reduce the carbon emissions created by cars and lorries. I'm also pleased to see the investment going into the pitches at KG5, and in particular the changing rooms, which have been in a very, very sad state of affairs for the last 3 years. They were burnt down, as we know, by an arson attack, but there has been a slow response to getting those built, and the people in the north of the city, particularly the children, really do need those facilities, hugely, particularly because it's such a large site. I'm disappointed that we have not taken forward the Conservative proposal last year to create 2 specialist posts in the planning department to work on the HMO database. I think it's absolutely crucial that the HMO database is up to date, comprehensive and workable, so that people can check if there are HMOs in their road, and if they think they're living adjacent to an HMO property that's not on the database, they can then report that. And I'd also like to place on record my thanks to the administration, in particular Councillor Matthew Winnington, for the work that has been done on addressing the care cap, which we also raised in our budget last year. And there has been some progress this year, which has certainly helped those that were hit the hardest by the introduction of the Liberal Democrat care cap previously. I'd like to say thank you to all residents across the city who took part in the budget consultation. It's not something that is taken lightly. We do place a lot of importance, obviously, on people's views, and having that interaction from the residents of the city in terms of the budget consultation is something that I think is extremely important. In terms of income generation, it's disappointing that we have not only not seen any income generation schemes being moved forward over the last 12 to 18 months, although you may say understandable given the circumstances that we're in a global pandemic. But we've also lost some of the income generation created by the Conservatives, and namely the Spinnaker Tower deal. Now, I'd like to say thank you to the Deputy Leader of the Council, Councillor Steve Pitt, who has been very frank and honest with me, and I take on board the points he's made, and we are all hopeful that that deal will come back at some point in the future, and owing to the decision by the previous sponsor, Emirates, due to the global pandemic, which I think we all understand. We have had a record level of support from the government. In fact, having spoken to our professional finance team, the words unprecedented levels of support were used to me in the preparation for this meeting. The government have delivered over 1 million laptops to low-income families across the country, and Portsmouth was no exception to that, receiving over £900,000. There have been many one-off grants that total tens of millions of pounds that we have had from the government, but in particular, we have had over £12 million of revenue support and revenue deficit funding from the government, made up of £6.6 million for COVID support, £1.4 million for adult social care earlier in 2020, £1.7 million for the council tax support grants from the government, an additional uplift, an additional £2.8 million for the adult social care uplift, taking into consideration the government's decision to pay the living wage, particularly to those poorest in society, which reflected a 2.2% pay rise for a number of people employed through the adult social care portfolio, and also contractors who were previously being paid the lower living wage. So I'm pleased that through the government's support, and also through ours previously as the Conservative administration, that people in this city were being paid the national living wage, the government's living wage, which was obviously incredibly important. Moving on, Lord Mayor, one of the key things for me, in spite of the current situation, is that the council and the Section 151 officer, Chris Ward, makes a very good point in his budget report, that there is still going to be £19 million of reserves in the Portsmouth City Council financial structure, which I think is incredibly important. And I think that this is the legacy, in part, it's a huge part, in legacy to the extraordinary achievements of the previous Conservative administration from 2014 to 2018. In fact, as an administration, we not only set records, but we made history and won national awards for the income generation schemes that we generated, many of which I should note were heavily criticised by the Liberal Democrats, particularly our property investment portfolio, which they criticised consistently for 3 years. And then as soon as they became the administration, they continued, and as of today are still reaping the income and the rewards of the foresight and the business approach, the business acumen adopted by the previous Conservative administration. This money that we raised meant that we were able to protect public services. Not only protect them, but we were able to improve them. And in the opening of this particular budget report this year, the Leader of the Council talked about how in their February 2014, the last Lib Dem budget that he proposed prior to me becoming Leader of the Council, how they protected jobs in their 2014 budget. Well, they may have done some of that, but they did also do a huge disservice to the people of Portsmouth by closing public toilets, by closing libraries on a Monday. And what we did as a Conservative administration was reopen the public toilets, was reopen libraries on a Monday, because we were able to do it better, more comprehensively, and we went out and generated money to, as I say, protect those public services. So I'm very disappointed to have to respond in a slightly negative way when that was not the approach I intended for this budget meeting today, owing to the highly unusual circumstances we find ourselves in. But as always, the Leader of the Council's defaulted to his attack position. He could have spoken about the great things that they've done over the last year, and I think we all would have supported and congratulated him. But sadly, disappointingly, the tone that he's taken once again in criticising what we did many years ago is why I now feel the need to have to defend and, particularly for public record, explain to the public that the rosy picture painted by the Leader of the Council is not actually quite how it was. As I say, we made sure that through the strength of our legacy, we have now been able to beef up and build into that £19 million reserve. I am 100% certain that had it not have been for the strongest of financial management of public finances seen in decades by the Conservative administration, we would not have £19 million in reserves today. The Leader of the Council also mentioned how the Conservatives should be ashamed of some of the decisions they made. Well, I've got a pretty simple one. And again, this is not language that I wanted to be using today, but feel the need now to respond. It's only right and fair to represent the true picture to members of the public in Portsmouth. That it's actually the Liberal Democrats that I believe should be ashamed for the poor decisions that they took for over a decade. For they provided the very minimum level of support to the most vulnerable, the most desperate people in Portsmouth in terms of the homeless. The government mandates that councils have to provide homeless shelter to people from November to the end of February, beginning of March, when the temperatures are often at freezing or below. In fact, it's illegal for councils not to offer support during those very cold months because people can die. When I became Leader of the Council, I was shocked to hear from former Councillor Paul Goddier and Councillor Gemma New that this support only covered those 3 or 4 months, coldest months a year. And when I asked what happens for the rest of the years, the rest of the months in the year, the housing team told me we don't have to offer them any support, so we don't. And that's what we have always done. So one of the first things that we did was go out and raise the £385,000 extra pounds through the income generation that we adopted as an administration to set ourselves apart from our predecessors, because we believe that looking after the most vulnerable in society was the very basic function of any administration. And for the first time ever in this city, we offered a bed for everyone. 365 days a year, we made sure that we had 130% capacity that we needed to look after the homeless in our city. So 40 beds available every evening, with an average homeless count ranging between 29 and 31 to 32 people per night. And I have to say that I am sad that the comments have been made today. Every administration does things right and things wrong, but certainly the picture that's been painted really wasn't a true reflection. In fact, in just over 10 years, they built 40 new council homes. In just over 2.5 years, we built 204 and laid the plans for many, many new council homes, and by the creation of a company called Ravelin to develop other sites around the city for joint partnerships with social housing providers as well. And I'm pleased that the Lib Dems have adopted yet another Conservative idea to continue the very ambitious house building targets. When we became the administration in June the 3rd, 2014, old people in this city who were referred for a care package were sadly having to wait over 200 days for an assessment for their care package. We got that down to 31 days. We thought it was disgraceful that people were having to wait 3/4 of a year just to start having an assessment before they even received any kind of income. What a very, very sad state of affairs. But it's yet another good example of proving that the Conservatives are competent and capable and have a clear history of delivering strong and effective public services across the country, which is obviously why we have such a huge, record majority in Parliament. We then heard from the Leader of the Council about the Victorious Festival. And we can all, I think we'll all be united in our agreement of the support and the significant uplift that the Victorious Festival brings to particularly the tourism industry in Portsmouth, and the tens of millions of pounds that it pumps into our local economy each year. It was in fact the Conservatives that agreed the new 7-year contract with Victorious back in 2015, making sure that they didn't leave the city and go elsewhere when they were being poached or attempts to be poached by other people. We also heard about greening Portsmouth and the significant number of trees planted, which I'm pleased to confirm, including the country park, those trees and the planting there was started under the previous Conservative administration. Which brings me on to another green initiative, and that is solar power. And the leader of the council advised us that, in fact, we are the largest provider of solar power councils across the country. And I'd like to say a huge thank you to Councillor Lee Mason, the previous cabinet member, who was ambitious, who had foresight, and who had belief that it was the right thing to do to put those solar panels all over the roof of the civic offices, on housing offices, on public buildings, and in fact, to deliver a partnership where we could deliver solar power into the dockyard and to other companies and private and public sector buildings across the city. And that happened. And I'm really pleased that that is yet another Conservative legacy that continues, as is on-street charging and electric charging points in all of the council's car parks. Again, yet another green initiative installed and brought on by the Conservative administration. It's a shame that our third flagship policy of the Boris Bike Scheme, of having a community bike scheme across the city, which we launched in March of 2018, was in fact scrapped in June 2018 by the administration, who seemed to have a complete lack of interest in having any kind of community bike scheme. And before they say Next Bikes pulled out, which maybe they did, I don't know, I wasn't a part of the administration, there's been no commitment or any kind of signs whatsoever in the last 2.5, almost 3 years from them to replace a community bike scheme, which is extremely disappointing. And finally, Lord Mayor, Bessel. We heard from the leader of the council, Victory Energy, how the business case didn't stack up, how it was overly ambitious, and how, thanks to him and his Lib Dem colleagues, they have stopped the Labour and Conservative councillors from wasting, and I quote here, "We have saved the public, we've saved them from these huge losses." That's exactly what Councillor Vernon Jackson said. I'm sorry to say that that's actually not true. In fact, Victory Energy was due to have a £6 million loan from the council, which would have taken 2 years to pay back. The business was due to launch in August 2018, and by August 2020, the loan would have been paid back, and we would have now been several months into the profit period. So it would have been another Conservative income generation strategy, which could have prevented some of the cuts that are in the Lib Dem budget today. In fact, when the leader of the council says that he has saved the people of Portsmouth and he's prevented those losses being run up, that is actually misleading, for he has continued to spend money through Bessel, and to this day the company is still not wound up. The Lib Dems have continued to spend money on Victory Energy, totalling well over £3 or £4 million now, with nothing to show for it. So there's the difference between the Conservatives and the Lib Dems. We would have run the business. I know that I have the capability to make sure that business became a success. We would have had the debt paid back by August last year. We'd now be into profit. The Lib Dems have failed to get rid of the company. They've carried on spending money on it. They've got nothing to show for it. And yet the leader of the council, in an embarrassing way, has brought that up yet again today. So finally, Lord Mayor, from me, we do have some key decisions to make. These are very important decisions that do affect everyone's lives across the city of Portsmouth. Finally, I would like to say a massive thank you to the staff who support councillors of all parties and do an excellent job, in particular Chris Ward and Julian Pike, for their support in creating our Conservative Budget Amendment 2021. So, Lord, I formally propose the Conservative Amendment to Portsmouth City Council for the budget 2021-2022. Thank you.
You're muted, Lord Mayor.
Thank you for that. Yes. Thank you, Councillor Donna Jones. Before I move on, are you happy now for it to be published on the website, Councillor Donna Jones?
Yes, please. Thank you very much.
Okay. In which case, Peter, if you could say when it's published, and just to be fair to the follow-on speaker, just give a minute, because I know everybody will immediately refresh that. So I'm just going to allow a minute there for people to get that out of their system before we move on. I have two councillors I can see that have joined us, Councillor Lynn Stagg and Councillor Weems. Councillor Lindstag, you said you've got no declarations of interest. Is that correct?
That's correct, Lord Mayor. And apologies for being late, but I was at a funeral.
That's okay. Councillor Steve Weems, also, have you got any declarations? Good to see you here.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have no declarations of which I'm aware. Thank you.
Okay.
And Councillor Hockaday, I believe, is here, Lord Mayor, and wishes to make herself known to you.
Councillor Hockaday, are you there? Have you got any declarations?
I have no declarations, Lord Mayor.
Okay, welcome also. Thank you.
Thank you.
In which case, first of all, Peter, have you managed to publish that?
Yes, Lord Mayor, the amendment is now online.
Okay, so councillors, it is online. I know you won't be able to resist refreshing it, but please, can you make sure you give due attention to the next speaker. I'm now calling upon the leader of the Labour Group, Councillor Stephen Morgan, to respond without time limit. Councillor Morgan, are there any amendments to be proposed, seconded and circulated through publication on the Council agenda website? If so, can you advise when you wish them to be published? Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. There are amendments in my name, seconded by Councillor George Fielding. If they could be shared after my speech, please.
Okay, fine. Can I have your seconder confirm?
Yes, confirm that I'm happy to second the amendments.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Morgan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I'd like to start my contribution today by paying tribute to the tireless dedication and commitment of City Council officers. I know from my own time as an officer at the local authority many moons ago now, the contribution council staff make in communities up and down our city, helping those in need, keeping our streets clean, our neighbourhoods safe, our children educated, and our environment safeguarded. The pandemic has already tested our city, and council officers have stepped up for us and delivered for Portsmouth, for which the Labour Group owes a debt of gratitude. I'd also like to thank Julian Pike and Chris Ward for their ongoing public stewardship of the council's finances and their tireless questioning of my group colleagues in the formulation of our proposals today. As always at budget meetings, Lord Mayor, it would be remiss of me not to set out how political decisions made by the Tories in Westminster have made an impact on our local decisions here in Portsmouth and the implications these have for everyday lives in our city's communities. I therefore want to first start by setting the wider context that local authorities across this country are facing and how we've ended up here today. Right at the heart of the local government funding settlement announced in December, there is detail of what the Chancellor and the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government claimed as an increase in funding for councils. But it is nothing of the sort. A far cry from the end to austerity and the levelling up agenda. The government made a choice to kick the can down the road and hit many already struggling families with a 5% council tax rise. There are two key issues with this approach. It's economically illiterate to push up taxes while the economy is in crisis. And is it dishonest to suggest the end of austerity when most councils will still be forced to cut services even after they impose the Conservative tax hike, because the rising costs of social care outstrip any increase in revenue? Nationally, this council tax hike could be £1.9 billion, a bombshell costing the average family £90 each. I pushed for the government to properly fund councils, including our own, so we wouldn't be faced with this tough choice today. But sadly, yet again, ministers failed to listen and do what is right for the people of Portsmouth. So yet again, my Lord Mayor, we are left with more of the same, a pay more, get less approach from this Tory government. Last March, as the country went into lockdown, the Secretary of State made a commitment to fund councils to do what was necessary to get communities through this crisis. But just 2 months later, he broke that promise. The Conservative-led Local Government Association estimates that councils face a £2.5 billion funding gap as a result of lost income and additional costs of supporting communities through these unprecedented circumstances over the past year. The government's planned council tax increase will raise just under £2 billion next year. If the government had not broken their promises on funding, councils would already have that amount available to them. For many councils, including our own, their biggest long-term financial headache is how to pay for social care. The government has cut funding over the past decade, forcing councils to restrict care, so it is available only to those in most severe categories of need. On his very first day in office, standing on the steps of number 10 of Downing Street, the Prime Minister told the country it planned to fix the social care crisis. But we still have no detail of it since the announcement, no certainty for local authorities, and no comfort for our loved ones. We've heard it before in our council chamber. A council tax increase raises less money in poorer areas, and with it, the government is deepening the postcode lottery of social care, instead of ensuring that every single older and disabled person anywhere in our country gets the care they need, regardless of where they live. My Lord Mayor, this council has declared a climate emergency, which this Labour group worked with green activists and community groups to proudly push for, and we continue to hold this administration to account for its delivery. As the LGA have said only today, and I quote, "It is vital that we tackle the climate emergency as part of our post-pandemic recovery. Councils share the ambition for a green revolution and want to work with government and businesses to establish a national fiscal and policy framework for addressing the climate emergency, supported with long-term funding. So if we are to build back greener and better and transform our local services, funding should come from central government, not asking residents to pick up the bill. Take local policing. We have one of the most poorly funded local police forces in the country. Yet the running theme continues from central government to pass the buck to local bodies. Hampshire's Chief Constable has called for the backing of the increase in council tax by £15 a year for Band D in the police precept. This, she says, will provide more officers and help to stem the tide against criminals and see more officers in Portsmouth. But we should not be stemming the tide. Government should be properly investing and committing to its promise to build back better. Instead, already vulnerable families in our city will once again be forced to pick up the tab. With Hampshire Constabulary losing over 1,000 police officers in recent years and an increase of just 18 new officers for our area, community policing urgently needs a gear change in support of what it's received of late. My Lord Mayor, our City Council and local government across the country deserves far better than this. We cannot expect to emerge stronger from this pandemic if central government is not willing to do both the economically and morally right thing by issuing a proper funding settlement that will address the problems of a decade of Tory and Lib Dem decline to the local services we all rely on, build back better and bring future prosperity for Portsmouth we all want to see. So moving then to the specifics of the Labour Group amendment, my Lord Mayor, when the Tories in Westminster and the Lib Dems in this administration make us pay more and get less, it's time to have a budget which prioritises Portsmouth. Our priority is in our amendment for a strong recovery for our city from this pandemic, to secure the economic recovery, to strengthen communities, to put trust back in the council to deliver local services, and to deliver an ambitious, greener and cleaner future. Labour wants a budget which benefits every community in every corner of our city. A budget which recognises the financial constraints of the authority, the challenges city families face now, and the impact of 10 years of Tory and Lib Dem austerity on our communities. Our specific and practical proposals learn lessons from the past and from this pandemic, with the aim to save money on back office costs and management and democratic overheads to invest in the front line of our city's recovery. Prioritising and protecting the services our communities care most about, and delivering on our serious ambition to tackle the climate crisis. In detail, Lord Mayor, our proposals before members today will cut management and democratic overheads. Our long-held belief that moving to all-out elections would not only save the council money, but make our decision-making stronger. Reducing the number of cabinet members from 10 to 7, in doing so, streamlining and reflecting the changing nature of the council and the services it provides. Reducing the members' basic allowance and special responsibility allowance. If our communities are feeling the financial strain, as council tax is hiked up again, those in public office should reflect that. And deleting the Leaders' Initiative budget, by all accounts an unnecessary slush fund for PR exercises and party political photo ops. We also want to see smarter use of our public assets, learning lessons from the pandemic and the way people have adopted newer ways of working, and a estate renewal programme, reviewing the usage of the civic offices and other council buildings to aim to reduce costs and our carbon footprint across the public estate. We also set out in our amendment our ambition to reverse the trend of public services being outsourced to private providers and bring these services back in-house, to be delivered by the local authority, putting trust back in our council to deliver local services. We've listened to the views of frontline staff, trade unions and their representatives, and recognised that after decades of outsourcing in local government, with private companies failing to uphold their contracts to deliver services, standards deteriorating and taxpayers picking up the bill, that enough is enough. Insourcing the delivery of key public services improves services, it saves taxpayers money, it increases democratic accountability of public services, and will ensure all staff members are paid and supported fairly with better terms and conditions. My Lord Mayor, people are more important than profit, and our council services belong to local people. That is why the in-house delivery of local services delivered by the public sector is the default option for this Labour group. This ambition will boost our city's economy at a time of recovery by spending taxpayers' money on local suppliers and local workers, giving power back to our communities and prioritising Portsmouth. My Lord Mayor, I'd like now to turn to how the Labour group will turn these savings into proposals which prioritise and protect the services our communities care most about and deliver our serious ambition to tackle the climate crisis. Firstly, we want to strengthen our communities by investing in our residents. Any conversation with a number of local health trusts tells us that there is real concern right now that the next public health pandemic will be a mental health pandemic. Not only those who have struggled with self-isolation and lockdown, but also those that have served tirelessly on the front line to beat this deadly virus. They're not only risking their physical health, but their mental health too. We know that pre-pandemic, according to Public Health England, the suicide rate in Portsmouth was higher than both the regional and national levels. The rate of emergency hospital admissions for intentional self-harm was significantly higher in Portsmouth compared to the rest of the region and England. And that's why in our budget, we want to prioritise residents' mental health and have found the money to do so. Secondly, we know many of our city's small businesses have been the hardest hit by this pandemic, with high streets already struggling before COVID. According to the City Centre of Cities, a leading think tank dedicated to improving the economies of the UK's largest cities and towns, Portsmouth city centre is classified as economically moderately weak. Meanwhile, according to the latest ONS figures, the counts of employment for those employed in the retail sector on high streets fell by 10% between 2015 and 2018. This problem has been there for some time, but it's been exacerbated by COVID-19. In addition, those working in high street related jobs such as arts, entertainment and recreation fell over 15% in recent years. That's why in our budget we want to prioritise our high streets with a forgotten High Streets Regeneration Fund and have found the money to do so. Alongside this, we want to enable the greening of our communities in every corner of the city with a Living Streets Fund working alongside SIL and crowdfunding schemes to truly create a city to share once and for all. Thirdly, my Lord Mayor, the pandemic has accelerated the way many of us keep in touch with friends, colleagues and loved ones. The rise of online communication and conference facilities have kept us safe and kept us going. But it's not been for everyone, and despite well-intentioned plans, many have been left behind. According to a report by the ONS published in 2019 that explored the UK's digital divide, as a region we are lagging behind our neighbouring region of London in terms of the percentage of population of internet non-users, with 8% of people in the southeast still not using the internet. 2 weeks into lockdown, over 97,000 of the government's promised laptops were not delivered to children across the southeast, while groups like Shaping Portsmouth have now been urging businesses to help disadvantaged children and vulnerable adults, which we welcome, to gain access to education and essential services. But that's why in our budget we want to prioritise ending digital poverty, working with businesses and community organisations to end the digital divide and develop additional, practical, locally led projects to help those on low incomes. Fourthly, Lord Mayor, COVID has shone a spotlight on the crisis in social care and the need for sustainable solutions to issues that have been going on for decades. Shearwater provides a good service delivered by care workers who are paid the foundation living wage, have pensions and reasonable terms and conditions. We're committed to extending these basic benefits to all care workers in Portsmouth as soon as funds become available, and preferably sooner by making this a commitment for all our contracts with care homes and care providers under the social value clauses of the welcomed proposed reforms to the city's procurement. Shearwater is also very useful to prevent bedlocking of recovering patients from local hospitals, which is much more difficult for private providers. We are considered by proposal the administration's proposals and share the views expressed by local trade unions. Cutting the top floor of Shearwater also moves all the fixed costs to a smaller number of residents, making the facility more expensive per resident. That's why in our budget, we want to reinstate this funding and protect social care for loved ones. And finally, Lord Mayor, on the detail of our amendment, we want to see the council better engage with residents to deliver on the climate emergency commitments and build back our city greener and cleaner. Dirty air affects too many residents, and we have been disappointed by the slow progress the city has been making to tackle this. Citizens' assemblies to address climate-related issues at local government level already have been conducted, such as Labour councils in Oxford and Camden in 2019-2020, so we are already falling behind. In the case of Oxford, the first council ever to do so, the findings of the report were directly fed into the budget for 2020-21, with engagement with a wide range of local stakeholders to draft it. We owe it to the next generation to use this recovery to secure our city's environment. That's why in our budget, we want to invest in a climate citizens' assembly and carbon audit. Both are crucial next steps in adding to what has already been achieved to reduce climate change locally, but greater speed is now needed. Both were promised in the 19th March 2019 agreement of our climate emergency motion, but it is shameful that this has been so evidently postponed by the current administration. My Lord Mayor, these are the Labour Group's budget proposals, prioritising Portsmouth over short-termism, whilst others sit back and let local people pay more but get less. Our amendments delivers a strong recovery for our city from this pandemic, securing the economic recovery, strengthening our communities, putting trust in our council to deliver local services, and delivers our ambitious greener and cleaner future. I urge all members to put party politics to one side and support our proposals today, to prioritise our city and ensure Portsmouth's recovery reaches every community in every corner of our city. We must ensure no one is left behind as our city builds back better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stephen Morgan. Peter, if you could now publish that on the website and let me know when it's published. Again, I'm just going to allow a couple of minutes for that to be published, to be fair to the follow-on speaker from the Progressive Portsmouth People's Group. Peter, would you let me know once that's published?
Lord Mayor, just whilst just during the interlude, I believe Councillor Coles has joined the meeting, so you may wish to introduce him. Thank you.
Councillor Tom Coles, good to see you here. Have you got any declarations of interest?
I have no interest, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, welcome.
Lord
Peter?
Mayor, yes, the amendment is now online.
Okay, members, it's online and you're going to go and refresh. Again, could I just ask you for your forbearance to listen to the follow-on speaker rather than you all rush off to go and read the amendments, etc. There will be time after this. Okay, so thank you. I now call upon the leader of the Progressive Portsmouth People Group, Councillor Claire Oudie, to respond without time limit. Councillor Oudie, are there any amendments to be proposed, seconded and circulated through publication on the Council Agenda website? If so, please advise when you wish them to be published. Councillor Oudie.
Hello, I do have an amendment and you can just put it up now, it's fine, mine isn't particularly big. Sorry, because I'm just loading, I'm just going to take 2 seconds just to read what the Labour amendment is so I can get it in my head. I must say that Councillor Jones was a little bit more clear with what she wanted to have in her amendment, so I managed to take that down quite easily, but I'm still just trying to look very quickly. So 30 seconds and I'll start my speech.
30 seconds before I will ask you to Peter, if you could publish also the Progressive Portsmouth People's Group's amendments on the website and let me know when that is published. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sure I can.
Councillor Oudie, let me know when you're ready to proceed.
I'm good. I can start now.
Okay, Councillor Claire Oudie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Whoa, it's getting off to a great start. So I've spent a great amount of time this municipal year worrying about the budget, as many others probably have been as well. We knew we had to cut anyway, because for the better part of a decade, we've had to go slightly further afield with those cuts. And because of COVID-19, we've had to cut even more, I suppose. And I think it's really horrible because of COVID. It's something that's completely out of our control, but we're having to slash further services. I really hope that you've been coping in what is lockdown 3 now. Our budget as PPP hasn't been as thorough as we liked, but Councillor Smith is working full time as well as other things. I'm homeschooling, trying to do a master's, and I must say I've really developed some unhealthy coping mechanisms, which I'm sure most of you will be horrified about, but I think some of you will probably empathise with me when I say I do go through days that are so similar that they just kind of blur into one, and there's days of despair with no amount of wanting to scream really loud or even touch the sides. I feel like I just close my eyes for 2 seconds and then 3 days have passed. But I'm really lucky because I have a very, very good support network. And if you do not, whether you're here in the meeting or watching from home, please reach out if you are feeling vulnerable, because I know a lot of things are. A focus past COVID needs to be on a number of things, and I think the most important things are, and I think I've only written 2 things at the moment. Number one, mental health recovery. I've always argued that we've been living in a mental health pandemic, and for the past 10 years really, but COVID has left every single one of us vulnerable, from depression to trauma, anxiety to severe breakdowns. I don't think I have a single friend who has escaped some form of mental health issue in the past year. Of course, of us, the less privileged ones, mental health issues were always there, worrying about wages, which for working families were cut from 100% to 80% because of furlough, worrying about rents, worrying about how to eat, for instance. We were seeing record numbers of self-referral to mental health services even before the pandemic, and now it's so much more worse. With the Hive Recovery Fund, we can push forward and get some more help to the Hive in order to connect to the most vulnerable and give them support. when COVID is over, the exemplary volunteer number. And I just want to say in another note, amazing thank you for all the people who have come forward to offer to volunteer at the moment. But that number is going to drop when life gets back to some semblance of normality, and not all of us will be qualified to give even basic mental health support. It's vital that we have support workers who are able to identify with the help of other volunteers who need it the most. This is really important post-COVID. I hope you all agree with me that if it wasn't for the Hive and the organisation skills of those associated, we would have been left in, quite frankly, a sticky place last year, and now, of course. And this isn't to distract from the work of the Portsmouth Coronavirus Support Group, who have also done really well to organise residents, but the Hive have done so much of the heavy lifting and will go on to do so for a very long time. So it's only right that we fund them right now. And whilst the recovery fund doesn't say the word farm at all, and I'm going to get this in here, I want to ask the leader very nicely, he doesn't really know about this right now, so I'm just going to blindside him, about the fact that I really think we should have an inner city farm. In the summer, during the easing of lockdown, I was fortunate enough to spend a few days away with my family in London, which was surprisingly quiet for London. I've never seen the South Bank so quiet. And in the quest to find 3 things to do, first of all, and this is complete coincidence because I didn't know the Tory amendment at all, there was this tiny dog park next to the Imperial War Museum, and at first glance, right, I thought it was a playground for toddlers, but then I looked closely, and it's like little crafts bits where you can like jump over and go through stuff. And I thought about that, and I put it in here to say, if ward councillors want to think about that to zhuzh up their wards with SIL, I don't think it's going to cost like 125 to 250,000 for like 2 dog parks. But I just thought that'd be a really lovely addition to some green spaces in here, and I think all councillors might want to think about that. But anyway, I went to Vauxhall City Farm, which is an inner city farm, and it's a small free place, and it incorporates a cafe, which obviously is making money, an education space, and it's run by volunteers and provides ample opportunity for community engagement and will help so many people from all walks of life. Now, maybe with the potential purchase of Sainsbury's at the top of town, which I'm still gunning to be an indoor car boot market type of thing, or a music venue like Printworks, when we're in a meanwhile use, or when Delancey maybe get their affairs in order, or when we force them to, because I've frankly had enough for the last 2 years I've heard about them and they've done nothing. I want a little bit of space in this regeneration to give us something special, and I think maybe in Charles Dickens to give us that a bit of farm, like to create a bit of farmland in amongst a massive residential development might be really nice. If not, could the leader consider maybe having something in the Hive to create a farm somewhere in Portsmouth? I think this is really important. It would be a benefit for every single person in the city. Schools and service providers can visit, they can learn, they can be weirdly freaked out by the alpacas, they can see little baby animals in the springtime and be taken away to a place that is outside of abject poverty and awful mental health. A safe place for where people can care for one another and care for the environment. Just the thought of somewhere nice as a farm for the city almost does bring me to tears. I can't explain it, but it seems like the most wonderful little thing. And I know that we just about have the resources there to deliver it. And maybe we could think about that with the Hive as well. So number 2, I was going to go on a proper beg right now for the service that I managed to get some funding for last year. I'm very, very happy to announce that with the money that the leader pledged last year, the For You service were able to expand to the For Me service, a continuation of the For You service, because that ends at 19. So For Me was going to be 19 to 25 years old, 25-year-olds. It helps those who are much more vulnerable and need more support, and can hopefully focus on LGBTQ care leavers too. I now need one more support worker, as the newly created For Us service, which focuses on under 13 and provides them with support alongside their parents. It's kind of leading up to puberty, as it's a tough time for all of us and a time that I'd rather forget, to be fair. But for LGBTQ children, it can be a really treacherous time. There is a huge risk of self-harm and suicides in trans teenagers especially, and to prepare children and their caregivers for the future is key to provide support and make sure children are supported in a very loving home, no matter what decisions they choose to make. So Gerald, the leader, sorry, has pledged some help towards the Hive and offered to supply more money for another member of staff for 4U. So I want to say that I'm eternally grateful. And I know you can't accept my amendment because our savings aren't that great, right? But I'm pretty happy because I'm the group leader and I get unlimited speaking time. So I'm going to carry on speaking now, so thank you. So on portfolios, on the rest of our amendment, we've included some stuff that may not cost money, but we can have a little chat about it now. And I guess it might be a bit of a coincidence with the Labour budget as well. So I'm not a fan of the sudden name changes of portfolios this year. I want to say that you've kind of starburst the opal fruits on resources when now it's called communities and central services. And I don't think that makes too much sense. I know you're trying to appear more kind of electable or possibly human, but when you say central services, all I can think about is the 1985 film Brazil, because that is obviously how everything's run, and nothing makes me think of meaningless and endless bureaucracy than naming something central services. Could we please think about changing the name back and putting the community side into culture and leisure, please? Because we believe it's better for joined up thinking and more of an efficient way to use resources. Could we also consider changing the name of housing and preventing homelessness back to housing too? Because it sounds pretty pretentious and actually tautological. Maybe we do for a portfolio shake-up, and Labour have mentioned that today. So I'm quite minded to be quite in support of that, because I do think we might have too many portfolios. So I'd like some consideration on a portfolio shake-up. Thank you. And after I've just conveniently slagged off community and central services, I would like to ask Councillor Atwell really, really nicely, because I love you lots, for a review into the corporate comms and our digital offer. So in December, I randomly discovered what internal markets were when I asked the digital team to put together a video for me, as I was really pushed for time on making something for the council's LGBTQ takeover day on social media. It was only an hour or two of work of putting digital artwork into a presentation, and apparently this would have costed us over at education about £300. I was slightly confused over it all, but it does sound really silly to me. Other people have tried to explain internal markets to me, and I'm still really confused about it. So you don't have to explain it again. I just think it goes completely over my head. I understand our digital team does make some external income, and that's really welcome, and they're really good and it's great. But I want a brilliant aligned comms team that can help individual directorates and services in the council with a plethora of social media platforms and accounts where we can really get in touch with our residents. Whether that's a dedicated foreign language account on Facebook, maintaining LGBTQ and public health accounts which are targeted, the same with youth services and others. I know that the library service have really good social media accounts, and culture and leisure kind of up their offer by offering live streams of bits of history in the summer, which was really welcome and very interesting. I don't want them to be like, how do you do, fellow kids? But I think that we should be engaging and just cracking out amazing content, to be fair. Not only will it instill a level of trust in the council, which I personally think is being eroded away by the pandemic out of our control, but will increase the democratic participation in the long run. I feel that maybe we might need a lesson in how to be a bit trendy and engaging, and maybe some help with basic digital tools like photo and film editing on your phone. But like I said, we're all getting older, and that means that we shouldn't stop learning. Hello, there's a point of order.
John Ferry, point of order.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, I'm trying to turn the camera on. Lord Mayor, I know that leaders are given unlimited speaking time. I utilise that myself on a few occasions. But surely there must be some tenuous link to the budget and to the subject matter that we're talking about today. Listening to someone going on about stuff that's completely unrelated and seems to be totally focused on how they feel and on personal issues is surely not appropriate. you know, if that has got to be a breach of the standing orders and the rule around time that's given to discuss the budget and budget saving. Surely it's not there to just talk about whatever you like for infinity.
I'm not sure what point of order, Councillor Ferret, you're asking. I did ask for clarification. 39B or 39A? Okay, Stuart, does I understand?
Well, Lord Mayor, I mean, I'm not sure myself, other than that we have a standing order which allows unlimited speaking time to present amendments about the budget or to talk about budgetary issues. This is clearly just someone using that time in order to talk about whatever they want to.
Councillor Ferret, about the comms reassessments written into my budget proposals.
Lord Mayor.
Can I just have a ruling? As far as I'm concerned, standing orders give the leader a fair democratic chance to speak unlimited. So, sorry, Councillor Udi, did you wish to continue? Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'd like to talk about some aspects of the Lib Dems budget, please. Looking at the budget consultations, our personal proposals have hit two of the three key themes which have resonated with residents in the consultation, from providing care to those with elderly or disabilities, or helping them live independent lives, and providing...
Sorry, Councillor Udi. Lord Mayor, I believe Councillor Dowling's got a point of order that he wants to make.
No, Stuart, sorry, apologies. No point.
I'm so sorry. Okay.
Quite happy to listen to Councillor Udi. I just thought I would help Councillor Ferret out as he was stumbling over the standing orders, and you know I'm a stickler for the rules.
Right, councillors, my ruling as the Lord Mayor is, please allow the leader of the People's Progressive Party to complete her unlimited time limit. Councillor Udi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Providing care to those with elderly or disabilities and helping them live independent lives, or providing social care services for vulnerable children and keep them safe. You can see how the farm can fit in with all of that. Obviously, I'm obsessed with that idea, but we need something fresh and beautiful in the city, and that is it. I must say, though, that because we're cutting £150,000 due to the reorganisation of the in-house residential care at Shearwater, I'm a little bit concerned. And I've had to ask questions, but I cannot see how the impact won't be like it says in the report. I asked politely to the leader to guarantee me now, or when you speak again later, that there will be no loss of service provision, and that the staffs whose jobs are at risk, that they will be redeployed in a way that corresponds with their needs and abilities as they suffer no loss of income, or that they may have to travel many miles to work. Please, I don't want you to break this promise. Like, we had some issues when we took over IBM, and we thought we were going to cheapy the staff, and we didn't, and we lost a really great member of staff there. I just want to have your word that will protect those people in employment, and I'm just really happy to cause chaos if you don't do that, because I've only got one year left in this place, and to be fair, I don't really intend to go quietly. I wanted to ask you about apprenticeship, and I'm hoping that you'll just clarify on the apprenticeships. So when we're going to save money about having apprenticeships, is this because we're going to pay people £100 a week whilst we're training them up? I don't think that if people take these positions, they still deserve an appropriate wage. I hope that you can clarify a point around that. But just because we're training someone doesn't actually justify poverty wages at all. We're still extracting labour from that person, and it's to your own personal benefit. So I just hope there can be some clarification. Thank you. I'm a bit worried about withdrawing services from both Paulsgrove and Lee Park housing offices, where we have a big amount of social housing. Whilst I get the demand for those particular services have kind of died since COVID, there's no need. This is probably endemic of the fact that we're moving to a more digitised society where folks can quickly communicate online, something of which should have been in the process a good few years ago. We're still kind of risking leaving particular people behind, particularly the elderly who come in for face-to-face contact and at times company. Also, I don't know how well the services are going over the phone or web forms, because it took over 2 months to be answered about some council tax IMO, and coincidentally I got a letter in the post and it got sorted today. I know this probably sounds really weird, but I'm concerned about the hedge trimming, because when I read the words reduction of the quality of the visual appearance of the environment, I don't know why it made me laugh, but could we have any compensation claims because like hedges aren't being cut and they're too big and they're causing accidents? And I guess we'd find out in the latter part of the year if this budget is if the Lib Dem budget amendment is successful. I'm happy pretty much with the capital budget. I know it's weird to have these cuts, but all we can do is this. I know bits of money live in different places, and we really must communicate that to our residents. As mentioned earlier, they are losing faith in us. I mean that they didn't have much faith in us in the first place, I think sometimes, but you catch my drift. I'm happy to see the urgent repairs in the schools, and there have been some trade union work about asbestos in schools, so that might be dealing with that. I guess you can clarify that for me too, and if it is to sort of some of that out, because I know a lot of our school buildings are over 100 years old. Anyway, I want to apologise to Councillor Hunt in advance, because I don't mean to go too hard on the community safety portfolio. But personally, I think it's a bit too authoritarian. Many of us here favour early intervention over just putting more cameras up. In fact, I'm probably more of a fan of putting more lighting in parks than putting cameras up, because putting lighting somewhere is probably more of a deterrent than a camera, because we've seen that we've got cameras everywhere and people are still committing crime. Maybe if you're that desperate, you can get dummy cameras because they'd be cheaper. COVID has certainly not reassured me that we aren't turning into a surveillance state. So maybe we should read the room a little bit and maybe lay off cameras. I would like to see some more grassroots projects in community safety, namely in Charles Dickens, St Thomas and Nelson wards, and I hope so going forward. I don't really want to talk too much about Bransbury Leisure Centre, but I spoke about this last week at the Culture, Leisure and Economic Development Cabinet meeting. And as you know, I am very supportive, but I do want to float an idea that possibly Mark Lewis can paint a lovely new mural reflective of the great community of Portsmouth on the side. So that's me done. I bid you all adieu. And if anybody is watching this at home, please accept the vaccine when you are offered it and convince your friends and family to get it too. I am losing my mind at home, as many of us are, and I think I just want to see my friends and sit on a common, and just I hope we can do that in the summer, and I hope we're getting there. So look after yourselves, everyone, and I present our budget amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Claire Rudy. I have not been notified of any other amendments.
Lord Mayor, sorry to interrupt you. I think Councillor Smith, I'm not sure if she's formally seconded that, so this might be an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Jeanette Smith. I should have asked you, are you formally seconding that?
I am formally seconding, but I don't think I heard the Labour amendment being seconded either.
It was seconded, Lord Mayor.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, formally seconded.
Councillor Fielding seconded it, yes.
That's right. Okay, thank you for the watching out for that, Stuart. Okay. Right, I have not been notified of any other amendments to be proposed. Stuart, is that correct?
That's correct, Lord Mayor.
Okay, so obviously taking into consideration whether a short adjournment to digest content would be useful, and the fact that under Standing Order 45 the leader can choose to accept any of these amendments as presented, we now move the proposal and amendments on the budget and capital programme before the council are now open to all other members of the council to debate, unless any group leader advises that they firstly wish to have an adjournment to consider any of the amendments before starting the debate. In which case, I will adjourn for 15 minutes and reconvene in 15 minutes' time. Do any of the council leaders wish to adjourn? Group leaders wish to adjourn? Okay, members, it is open on to the floor then, as nobody wants to reconvene in 15 minutes. Members, are there any speakers? Okay. Stuart, do you see any?
I can't see any at the moment, but you may just want, as you've just gone through, Lord Mayor, you just want to make sure that there isn't anyone who wants to talk. In which case, if there's no speakers, obviously you'll be getting the leader to sum up.
Okay, I can't see any, and therefore I'm asking the leader of the council to sum up. Councillor Gerald Vernon-Jackson, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I think this is the shortest ever budget debate that we've had. I do remember being told several years ago that one of Andrew Storey's jobs as deputy leader of the Conservative group was to remove pages from Frank Worley's speech before Frank had made them, and that Frank often didn't realise that several pages had been removed from his speech when he read them. But everybody was pleased it was shorter. But I think it's been an interesting discussion. I think there are some things here that I think are bear a little examination, because what might appear initially to be really rosy and interesting, on a little bit of further examination might not look quite the same. So, my Lord Mayor, I've been interested to see in the Conservative proposal their suggestion of how they would fund this. So the suggestion here is that they would sell off land in Havant owned by the City Council, upon which 105 affordable housing units are going to be built. So that's families, but houses for local families at rents they can afford. So the commitment here from the Conservative group is to not build those homes. For those 105 families have to remain homeless or have to remain in temporary accommodation. Now that cost to the taxpayers of this city.
Sorry, Leader, I have a point of order. 39B, Councillor Donna Jones, would you like to state the reasons for 39B? Thank you.
Yes, sure. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Through you to the Leader of the Council, a point of explanation, 39B, around the Conservative intentions, it would be to do a joint venture and to have social housing on there as well as private sector, so a joint development. We don't want to deprive anyone of social housing. Thank you.
Clarification. Back to you, Councillor Gerald Vernon-Jackson.
So we're going to sell off the land to somebody and then want to build something that we want. It just does not seem possible. So that's going to cost £2.5 million a year to be able to keep 105 families in temporary accommodation each and every year. And you can't have your cake and eat it. You can't say we can sell the land off, but we're going to get somebody to build social housing on it. How are you going to pay for it? And that's the problem with this proposal. The other thing I thought was really interesting was to read the detail of the Conservative proposal. The detail of the Conservative proposal is about voting for a council tax rise today. Exactly in line with what the proposal here from the council. But putting that off for a year. So that in a year's time, people get a double council tax rise. Now, we've got experience of the Conservatives and double council taxes. We remember the Conservatives and their love of the South Sea Town Council and the wish to impose a second council tax on every single person in Southsea. We know that they like to push up taxes as hard as they can. So what they're doing here, my Lord Mayor, is they're trying to suggest to us that we should have a double council tax rise next year, just when families can't cope with it. To be able to buy a few votes, with a few leaflets in the council elections. My goodness me, my Lord Mayor, how weak can you get with trying to bribe the people of this city and then double council tax hit them in a year's time?
Yeah, Councillor Vernon-Jackson, clearly there is a point of order. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
that's fine.
Need to make sure. Councillor Donna Jones, point of order 39, point of information 39B. would you like just to clarify? Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As you can see, I've indicated 2 on the comments, so I've actually got 2 points of order. I'll be very succinct. The first one is around the assumptions that Councillor Vernon Jackson has made. This is a point of explanation, 39B, that it will cost the council more money to pay for temporary housing for 109 families or 115 families. That is not the case. I believe that the site would get developed faster and quicker and more efficiently if it was done in conjunction with the private sector. So I disagree with his statement there, and I think I explain that to members. My second point of order, Lord Mayor, is 39B again, which is a point of explanation around the double counting. This is actually a very serious point, and you know, I want to be as fair and equitable with Councillor Vernon Jackson as I can. Next year, under the Lib Dem proposal, there will be another council tax increase, and that will be 2 years consecutively, with no reprieve being given for this year during the pandemic. The Conservative proposal is not a double count for next year; it's for this year to have some reprieve because many people are out of work. And I think it would be better to leave the politics out of this for today and to think about the people of Portsmouth.
Thank you for that explanation. Councillor Vernon Jackson, back to you if you would like to complete your summing up. Thank you.
Thank you, my Lord. I expect we'll have another 19 interruptions, but such is life. So, my Lord Mayor, we need to be clear that the proposal put forward by the Conservatives mean 105 vulnerable families in this city languishing in temporary accommodation, not being given somewhere to live, at the extra cost to council taxpayers of £2.5 million a year. A disgrace to the people of this city. And then they want to go and try to bribe people by putting off their council tax for a year and get the double whammy of a tax rise in a year's time. That double whammy of tax rises from the Conservatives is a disgrace to people, and it is just trying to buy votes with cheap politics. My Lord Mayor, I am speechless, but I will continue. The only other bits and pieces I want to pick up from other people's proposals are just to say that I'm concerned with the Labour amendment with the decision not to fund the replacement IT system. As I understand it, the IT system is coming to the end of its life and it's not being supported in the future. If we can get away without buying it, we will. But at the moment, it is essential for us to be able to look at school admissions, school exclusions, children missing education, special educational needs, reduced timetables, children in employment and entertainment, monitoring school attendance with weekly data feeds, and removing this ability for the council to be able to monitor how kids are doing, where they're at school, I think is a really short-term view from the Labour Party. I think we need to make sure that we're supporting schools, supporting teachers, supporting parents, supporting pupils to make sure that their kids are in school, in the right schools, on the right days, and getting into school. Without this system, admissions are more difficult. And I think the idea of getting rid of it and saying that we're not going to have the right computer system to be able to support local families in education is a short-term view from the Labour Party, and I'm disappointed by that, and I'm sure families around the city will be as well. So, my Lord Mayor, I've looked at the proposals. I think there are several useful things that we can look at after this budget meeting to look to see if there are ways in which we can flex some of the details. And there's been some interesting stuff. I'm interested in stuff about apprenticeships, but I think our proposals do more. I'm interested in stuff about mental health services, but I think the proposals from the PPP that we've accepted do more. I think there's some interesting ideas around dog walking areas, and I think we can probably do some of those. But, my Lord Mayor, in terms of coming to us and working with us to get things accepted, I'm sorry if people didn't come to do that. Therefore, I'm happy to propose the Council's budget position unaltered from today. And I do hope, my Lord Mayor, that this is the last time that we ever see a Conservative double tax whammy increase being proposed on the people of this city. So, my Lord Mayor, I do hope that's the end of this trying to buy people's votes in such a short-term way. I think you have to look for long-term, sustainable sensible financial management from this administration and contrast that with what we've been offered. And we have another point of order, I think, presumably.
Okay, Councillor Donna Jones, point of order.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Just to clarify, we are not proposing any double taxation. We are proposing the same council tax increases as the Liberal Democrats, but we are offering a cash rebate to people for 1 year to come out of capital and not from revenue, so as not to create a financial pressure in the future, to accommodate people, particularly those who work in tourism, leisure, retail, which make up a large part of Portsmouth, who have lost their businesses, lost their jobs. There are people out there who are facing genuine hardship, which I know that the Leader of the Council isn't facing hardship himself, but many people out there are. There is no double taxation, and I would ask him to withdraw those comments, because we are going to make life easier for people this year, not harder, in complete opposite to the Liberal Democrat proposals.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Don Jones. I think you've clearly explained that. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. So my Lord Mayor, what's being proposed here is that, by the Conservatives, is that next year you'll pay a double council tax rise. It's very, very clear in the paperwork here. And I think that's bad. What people have said in the consultation we did with residents of this city, that they recognised that the council needed to put up the council tax. Right. And that was what residents chose and said they thought was the right thing to do.
Right.
I'm disappointed that the Conservative opposition has decided that that's not what they want to do, and that they want to ignore that. I understand there are more points of order, my Lord Mayor.
So I have, councillors, I have 2 points of order just right at the end there. Councillor Matthew Atkinson and Councillor Donna Jones again. Can you be succinct? I do not want to repeat of what's been covered.
I'm happy to be succinct, though. Obviously, as a point of explanation, it could continue being explained as long as it continues being misrepresented. But the simple point is, no position has been taken by the Conservatives on council tax next year. So the leaders simply cannot say we're proposing a double increase, because we are not. We're proposing a standard increase this year with a rebate in cash, because this year people are struggling. We've taken no position on council tax next year, and so the leaders simply cannot claim we are proposing a double tax increase. We are not claiming, and as long as he does so, we could legitimately continue to explain that that is not our policy.
All right, thank you for that explanation. Councillor Donna Jones.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. 39B point of explanation. I'm not going to repeat what I've already said. I think I've made those points to members of the council. But I will say this, is that if the Leader of the Council continues to mislead members of the public and members of the City Council, I will continue to raise a point of explanation so that it's not taken that he is correct, because he's not. I'm not going to repeat the points. The second point is the reason that we are having a record short meeting this year is because of the pandemic, and I think it's wholly inappropriate for us to spend hours sitting in a meeting having highly political debates when people are dying around the world and in this city. And so before the meeting at 1 o'clock today, I called the Leader of the Council and said that the Conservatives would be not engaging in a lengthy debate which will achieve very little indeed. We have done that in the spirit of trying to do what's right for the city today, to allow our officers to get back to doing very important work, and I'm extremely disappointed that he has taken the opportunity to sling political mud once more. It's in very, very poor taste, and I would urge him to stop doing it immediately.
Okay, Councillor Graham Heaney. Councillor Graham Heaney, I have a standing order 39B in your name.
Yes, it is standing order. The interpretation of the order question be a boring nerd on standing orders.
Councillor Heaney, can you get nearer to your mic? We can't hear you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry to be a boring nerd on standing order. Standing order 39 says a member who has spoken on the question and make a short explanation of any point that has been made. And the point of that is to stop standing order 39 being used to allow more people to get on the debate when they haven't actually spoken. Unfortunately, Councillor Atkins has not spoken, so cannot use 39B to make any point of explanation. So I just think we need to get this absolutely clear, because this is going on, time after time, and we need to use the standing orders and operate them properly, because they're there for a purpose. So I just want to make that point.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Graham Heaney, for that explanation of an explanation. Councillor Gerald Vernon-Jackson, have you finished your summing up?
I have not. I keep being interrupted, my Lord Mayor.
Okay, please proceed.
So, my Lord Mayor, I think it is very, very clear that for people wanting a sensible, financially competent council, not one trying to do gimmicks, not one trying to whack in double tax whammies in the future, that this administration provides that. I'm disappointed by game playing from the Conservatives, and I recommend our budget. I think it is sensible. I think it is competent. I think it listens to the views of residents, and it makes sure that we continue to build on this extra money we put into both adults and children's social care to look after the most vulnerable. So, my Lord Mayor, I'm happy to propose this budget and hope that this is voted through unanimously by the Council. Thank you, my Lord Mayor, and may I thank all members for being involved in this debate.
Thank you, Councillor Gerald Vernon-Jackson, and thank you, members. That was one of the quickest ones there. So before we move to the voting, Stuart, I'm going to take some guidance for you to give to members because obviously there are several amendments there. We need to know what we're about to vote on because none of the amendments have been subsumed or taken into account into any of this. Do you want to lay out the ground for us?
Yes, of course, Lord Mayor. You obviously have the 3 amendments from the 3 groups in front of you. Historical precedent suggests that you take them in the order of the Conservatives group first, the Labour group, and then the PPPG group. Obviously, the order is your discretion, but that's the historical precedent, which I assume you'll wish to follow.
Correct. Let's follow that. So we are voting on the Conservative amendments. Is that correct?
That's correct, Lord Mayor.
Okay, and are we taking a recorded vote?
Yes, it's a legal requirement on budget votes that they're recorded anyway, so you do have to do it, yes. Okay. So let me know when you're ready for the roll call.
We're ready for the roll call. Members, we're about to take the roll call. Please go ahead.
This is on the Conservative group amendment on the budget. I'll read your names out in alphabetical order. If you could say whether you're for, against, or wish to abstain. Councillor Rob Wood.
Abstain.
Councillor Ashmore.
Against.
Councillor Atkins.
For.
Councillor Atwell.
Against.
Councillor Bosher.
For.
Councillor Coles.
Against.
Councillor Corkery.
Against.
Councillor Dowling.
Against.
Councillor Vazacali.
Against.
Councillor Fielding.
Against.
Councillor Ferret.
Abstain.
Councillor Fuller.
Against.
Councillor Heaney.
Against.
Councillor Hockaday.
For.
Councillor Hooper.
For.
Councillor Horton.
Against.
Councillor Hunt.
Against.
Councillor Jonas.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Madden.
Against.
Councillor Hugh Mason.
Against.
Councillor Lee Mason.
For, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Morgan.
Against, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Norton.